What's up, fellow vault dwellers? How we doing today? Everyone safe? Everyone well isolated? Everyone keeping their social distancing? Got your stockpiles of toilet paper all set? I hope so. I've actually been on self-quarantine since the end of the Washington homestand. It's been like 2 weeks. I was in isolation before it was cool. So I think it's starting to get a little weird. I'm honestly such a raging introvert that I'm completely satisfied with being inside, not being able to actually have to deal with people. Huge fan. What's up, man? How are ya? Welcome to the stream. Trying to figure out, I've got a couple of ideas of what to work on today. And as usual, I'm happy to just chill. Yeah, hit me with a question. Actually, you know what? Hit me with a question, but give me a moment to spam everybody and their maternal figure. Do spam in the Discord, spam in the Discord. I think I finally hit the point in my life where I always say casters and castles instead of reversing it, which is a nice place to be, you know? It's nice to feel like you're making progress in something in life. Hit me with your question. If it's an in-depth one, it's going to take me a moment to answer, and I will need time to put out a tweet and all that jazz. And send it. And retweet it from the personal account. And let's see. Choo Choo, what's up? How are ya? How are things? How's life? Alright, what do you have to change for an adventure? In an adventure as a DM for a one-on-one adventure rather than a party-based one. So there's a few different things you have to change to run a solo adventure. First off, I think it really helps to expand your concept of what an adventure actually can be. An adventure doesn't have to involve combat at all. An adventure doesn't have to involve dungeon crawling, though I think most DMs at this point are pretty comfortable doing things other than dungeon crawling. And so the solo adventure that we did, we're running a sandbox based on the city of Baldur's Gate. And my players are vested. They have interests. They have characters that they like, NPCs that they like, factions that they like, mysteries they're trying to uncover, all that jazz. Good to have you here, Chu. Thanks for stopping by. With less Dungeons and Dragons every campaign. So in our adventure, a lot of it was conversation, a lot of it was skill-based and exploration-based. You can do fights. You absolutely can do fights, but you have to remember that in 5th edition, because of bounded accuracy and flattened math, numbers matter tremendously. So if your PC is outnumbered at all, they are in danger. So you have to pull your punches a lot. You have to be very careful with multiple groups of enemies. I suggest doing, again, a lot of complex negotiations and diplomatic scenes. Infiltration. Running infiltration adventures is fantastic for solo missions. You want to have a lot of different fail states. Matt Colville recently did a video about fail states, and the example he gave was, if you fail a stealth check on an infiltration mission, do you immediately lose? Because if you alert the guards and the whole base goes on alert, that could be like completely GG, you're done. And that's one of the common, especially in video games that have a forced stealth section, one of the most common complaints is that if you get spotted at all, you usually lose. Whereas in games that are really focused on stealth rather than just shoehorning it in, you'll see things like, oh, I just made too much noise and the guard heard me and now their alert level is rising and now they're walking over here. So every single time that the players fail at something, you don't just immediately go to the fuck up cascade has begun. You have, okay, the guards are suspicious. Okay, now one of them is walking over to check it out. Now they're talking to each other and asking if they should do something, so that you can ratchet up the tension without just making further progress impossible. A solo campaign needs to have lots and lots of fail states, because under normal circumstances, if one player in a party fails something, the rest of the party can bail them out. But when they're truly on their own, you want to avoid any kind of instant death. You want to make sure that if they get captured, that's not a game over, that's a new adventure. You want to make sure that there's a lot of ways for the adventure to just continue. Don't outnumber your players. Use cinematic combat. So several sessions ago, and this might be one of the adventures that we lost the VOD for, unfortunately. Several adventures ago, Crozan, the dwarf wrestler barbarian guy, he engaged Garmalt, the master of the Bannerless Legion, in single combat. They did a wrestling match, and it was a one-on-one fight. And when you're running a one-on-one fight, it's easy for it to just devolve into I hit, I miss, I hit, I miss, I hit, I miss, I hit, I miss, trading hits until one of you goes down. That's not super interesting. That's, the equivalent of old school RuneScape, where you walk up and click on somebody and the two of you just go until one of you is down. So we made the fight scene interesting by having environmental effects at the excuse me, touching my face, that's a COVID no-no. There were fight scene, instead of having like, okay, you just need to fight these guys and fight these guys, it was, you need to defeat this martial artist in this sand pit at the bottom of a tavern with everyone watching. So you had to do multiple things. You couldn't just attack every round. You also had to hype up the crowd, and if the crowd was supporting you, then you'd get certain advantages. And you could do, like, throw him into one of the pillars, or use this kick up sand in his face. Give the player the opportunity to narrate all of their actions, their attacks, their successes, and their failures. If you let the player narrate their failures and why they fail at something, that's super valuable, because one, it does give them a certain layer of protection against just instantly failing. Sleight of hand to use pocket sand. I probably would have had it be a sleight of hand check to use pocket sand. Probably bonus action, sleight of hand, pocket sand to grant the blinded condition on his opponent for till the end of his turn or something like that, which would have given an advantage on the attack. And when you give your player the ability to narrate all their attacks, their failures, their successes, what started out as just a, let's see which of these two people can chip the other person's HP down the fastest, turned into a really cool fight scene. It was super evocative. He got to call all of his shots and really get an idea of how his character fights and choreograph it out. And that sort of fluff is really important in a solo game, because when you have 4 people at the table, they can each sort of have the spotlight a little bit, but can the group win the fight? This tactically interesting large-scale fight is fine by itself. But 5th edition is tactical. It is tactical combat, but it doesn't super focus on tactical combat. Like Pathfinder 2 really focuses on tactical combat in a very interesting and evocative way. So use cinematic, highly narrative combat, avoid outnumbering your players, give them more things to do than just clear dungeons and fight monsters, give them lots and lots of fail safes, so fail states. So if they fail, instead of just going right to you're screwed, ratchet up the tension with more and more little consequences. Give them interesting non-player characters to interact with. I find that when I try to create interesting PCs in a normal campaign, the party likes to take the spotlight, which is fine. It's their, as a DM, I want to make sure my cool stuff is there and I'm getting a chance to shine, but I usually share the table like 50-50 or 60-40 with the party. I always get to do something. So I often let the party take the role-playing. I don't have my NPCs be too dynamic and too out there talking, because they're stealing the spotlight from the players, and the players want to roleplay and have fun. But in a solo environment, it's important to have very well-developed characters and non-player characters, because the PC can't bounce off of other members of the party. So those would be some of my tips if you want to run a solo adventure. It's also really important, I think, to have in a solo adventure for your party, for your player, to have a lot of agency and to have their own interests. Sandbox play works really well for a solo environment. You could do a tightly narrative, more streamlined, on-rails sort of game with a single player, but I think that having a player who cares about things and wants things really helps make it feel more rewarding to them. My pleasure. That is what I have to share about running a solo game. I've run multiple solo campaigns. I usually give my party members some sort of retainer or backup just so that the math works out and they have a foil for roleplay along the way, but you want to make sure not to let that person steal the spotlight. Have you started to go through the submitted NPCs? I had to make some assumptions about the socioeconomic landscape of current Romar when creating him. So I went through the current NPCs once, and I'm going to do so again. But it kind of relies on us getting to where modern Romar is. And I wonder if this is the... I wonder if this is the computer where I had all my paint files where we were doing the map of Romar. I sincerely hope it was. Fun fact, I bricked my home computer. I was in the process of setting up my work from home station to do Overwatch League, and I dropped my external hard drive and it stopped mounting, so I decided to pop it out of its case and mount it directly inside my tower, and now my tower won't boot at all. I'm honestly pretty pissed. I'm not at the point where I think something is broken. I mean, my files on my external might just be gone, which would ruin my day and my week, maybe my month. Fortunately for me, I keep a lot of my stuff online. I use Worldbuilding, I use Google Drive, etc. So fingers crossed. But even then, my tower is down. I'm not convinced that my tower is completely screwed, that it actually is bricked, that the MOBO's bad or the graphics card or something. You know how it is when you take apart a PC? Who knows what thing you bumped or you didn't plug in right, etc. The problem is now I have to do complete surgery. I have to take the whole thing apart and rebuild it, and my case is super annoying. Right now the power switch isn't doing anything, like literally it's just not doing anything. So I wonder if I bumped one of the wires there or the connection between that and the motherboard. But my case is so crowded with the big old graphics card and the weird form factor and all that stuff that it's just an absolute pain in the ass to plug all the little things in. So I might be looking at a different case when I take it apart and put it back together. Yeah, it honestly, a new case really seems like. Yeah, so new NPCs, subscriber NPCs and such. So last time I was doing a lore stream, I was working on the city of Romar, and I was doing sort of its prehistoric stuff. We came up with some cool lore. We started mapping out what it looked like in the prehistoric era. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through some of the additional eras, maybe 1 to 2 more eras to get a good map of the city and then really build out the socioeconomic status. I already know a lot of the major players, NPCs, and factions in town. And once I got to that phase, that's when I was going to start slotting in the subscriber NPCs. Lock up all the cats or you'll have to rebuild the sandbox after you... Completely true. I have 5 cats and yeah, they see sand, they use it. So chat, I've been thinking, while I want to continue developing the city of Romar, I also want to have something that I can run a sandbox in immediately or sooner, right? This quarantine and the weird schedule changes and working from home, aside from the massive socioeconomic and interpersonal disruption, fun, it also provides some new opportunities for creating content. I mean, I'm streaming on Casters and Castles pretty regularly. We had plans as a group to get some content out in front of you folks, but a lot of that depended on getting everyone in the same room, which is now obviously impossible. So I want something that I can run that is viable for running a game, not just having these lore streams, and I want it quickly. And I've got 2 options. I could sort of just build up Romar real fast and just get it ready, or I could work on something farther away, because if I'm running a... what's the word I'm looking for? A sandbox, right? If I'm running a sandbox, then a lot of sandboxes work best at low level. You can do... yeah, that's my thought. Outlying towns. I'm thinking, what if I continue to work on Romar bit by bit, but we start out by building up a more frontier outlying town that can be our adventure hub, like that sheep adventure Bren run. Exactly. So you build up one town and the local area and some adventures for people to go on nearby, Once we've got that, I can run a sandbox. And once I can run a sandbox, not only is that something we could use for Arc 3 whenever that happens, but it's also something we could do with guest stars, we could do a West Marches style thing. So I'm kind of leaning towards continuing to work on Romar in parallel, but running out to a fishing village or something along those lines. Because that way we can have faster adventures. Then we build up Romar, can run the game, and we can build up Romar on the side, and eventually when players are actually high enough level to deal with the Duke and the big factions there, then they can move out there. I think that would be more fun. I don't want them to be that far away. I want the adventure happening right now to occur close enough to Romar for that living world to kick in, right? I want the sense that every adventure that happens in this space with all the different parties and side quests and Tales from the Golden Bough and miniseries and stuff, I want it all to sort of build up the legend of this world. I want it to be a shared world. So, and I've already said we're using Odasvale as our next setting. So I think I'm going to pick one of these outlying towns to the west. We're going to make that our starting place, and Romar will be where you go to the big city once you've actually leveled up in the woods, fighting goblins and stuff, and you're ready to start messing around with the big political scene. Section not right on the delta. Away from the continent to a strange... Did I make adjustments to the lake yet? I didn't. That's a good point. Do you have those figures? Because... Let's see. Alright, so what's... Everything flow. All right, so you're a river, and you're flowing from these mountains. You're flowing from these mountains, and you're flowing from these mountains. And this is all forest with some hill, but the water flows down to here, and then the water flows down to here. And so the city of Romar, by the way, it's here. And I am thinking of developing a village, either this one up against the mountains and kind of close to the big political turmoils of the northern kingdoms, or this one. Yeah, Goldshire, basically. We want to build Goldshire. Just check my pings. Pings removed. All right. If it were a saltwater lake on Earth, the lake would be approximately 100 hexes with 12-mile hexes. All right, so here is the lay of the land. And here's the problem. I think what actually happens here is that the lake, because it can't go this way. This is hills. So unless we destroy these hills, okay. When we have this little lowland right here, this is all hills. We have the forest here. These are the Foamhor Woods, and the Foamhor Woods are where Lycia Norwellen is from. Yeah, it's where Lycia Norwellen is from. Well, I prefer not to go with the obvious magical, it just, the water goes away magically. We're going to fix it. We have two choices. Choice one. What if the whole weirdness with the forest growing changed the lake's size? I'm sorry, I don't have a good colorblind mode for all of this. For reference, this is a valley, and these regions are all forest. Yeah, it is interesting. I don't think this software, Worldographer, has a colorblind fix. The water is over here. Entertain me whilst I prepare dinner. Good man, Bradley. Good man. So we have a couple of options. One, if the river eventually flows all the way out, and let me swap to continent level. If the river eventually flows all the way out to the sea, then it doesn't have to be as large. Or if it eventually flows all the way down here to the swamps of Gluckmore, then it doesn't have to be as large because it has an outlet. Yeah, our options are huge-ass lake, 100 hexes in size, and I don't think I want that because I have this huge-ass lake. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... How many hexes here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's probably like 25 hexes. Something along those lines, maybe a little less. So we're talking a lake roughly this big. Yeah, enjoy the only emote that we currently have approved for casters and castles. So the lake needs to grow. Either we can cut a channel and have it flow down into Gluckmore, into these marshes, and then out to sea. In which case we still need a larger like collective lake right here, but it doesn't have to be as large, you feel me? Heavily haunted. So I think what we'll do is I've got Elm Spire right here, but let's move Elm Spire. Let's move. What is this? Let's move Elm Spire. I need more of this. Oh my god, it has sunglasses. That's fantastic. Is that channel points? It's probably channel points, right? That slaps. All right. Yeah, so for whatever reason, the dashboard that I have right now does not show that you did that. Maybe it's just because that's not a reward that has to ping the whatchamacallit. Okay. Features. Here we go. Features. So we're going to go to features. We're going to select Elm Spire. We're going to move Elm Spire here. Ahem. I said Elm Spire. Why are you like this? No, I don't want to rotate you. And I don't want to... Alright, set that to 0. It's a good program, but sometimes it's a little bit finicky. We're going to drag you here. Alright, so we've just moved Elm Spire, which is where Mika's character was from in our previous adventure path. And thank you. Twitch just does it magically. That's phenomenal. So we've moved Elm Spire. So now what we can do is disadvantage for the... we're not even like... This is lore. We're not even doing... Thank you for the sub. I don't know how you can give me disadvantage while I'm making lore, but if we can find a way to have it, I don't care. Disadvantage to the DM. Understandable. Have a nice day. Alright, so let's delete this river. So we've deleted this river because, yeah, I already have disadvantage. And treasure. The next person I play D&D with gets treasure. I wonder if I can roll for it. Yeah. So what I'm doing, by the way, as I go through the treasure tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide, is I'm clearing the way. I'm going to expand the lake down to the south. I might still run it all the way to the ocean, but I'm definitely expanding the lake just because. Can we pick up where we left off? Oh, let me go in order. All right. So first, treasure. I should have this memorized by now. Still a tier 1 treasure. So it's on Dungeon Master page 136. And we're going to roll on the individual treasure for challenge rankings 0 through 4. Pull percentile die. There we go. Construct the map with rolls. There are ways to do that. 73. All right, so that means we roll 3d6. And 12 gold pieces. All right, so we resolved that. Speaking of, what is the software we're using? So this software is called Worldographer. It is a little bit finicky, but it's super helpful. It has multiple levels. So here's the world level. This is the eastern continents of Giru and Dusatum. I have to move this entire kingdom of Sharon, this desert empire. We're moving it to the western continent, which is going to be a thing. But the reasons are really, really good. And I can't talk about them right now because they're completely irrelevant to anything we're doing. So this is the world scale. I don't remember how many hexes these are. I know that the next size down is 60 mile hexes. So here's the continent scale at 60 mile per hex. And here is the kingdom scale at 12 miles per hex. And all these levels are adjustable. You can decide how many hexes across every hex is at the different levels. It's Worldographer. There's a free version. I don't remember what the free version can do because I got the pro license a while ago to work on all this stuff. They also have Cityographer, Dungeonographer. It's a whole suite. Works pretty well. Has its bugs, has its glitches. But for someone like me who doesn't want to actually mess with lines and fractals and drawing, which is not my skill set at all, this is super helpful. Can we pick up where we left off on observers and castles? So with that campaign, I don't know if we'll continue to play with that group on stream. Some groups like being just in the firing line to have chat unleash chaos upon them. Others don't. So I'm definitely down to keep playing that campaign. I don't know if we'll continue to stream that game. Talk to your fellow players. We'll set it up. We'll get it playing. If they're down to stream, great. If not, we'll just play it off stream. And but I will be looking. Part of the goal of this is to set up a West Marches style sandbox for Anacra that I can run for guest stars and recurring players and subscribers during the Great Quarantine and possibly beyond, depending on showbiz, right? Depending on showbiz. All right, construct lore map purely through rolls, then give disadvantage. There are tables for that. I don't have them in a convenient format right now, but it is entirely possible to do some just rolls. And it might be fun to do a stream where we randomly generate like a town or a local area, and we just always do dice, and we could do disadvantage there. It would take some working to get the engine built the way I want it to, but it's theoretically possible. The treasure you can give me, Gnomes, is by answering all the inevitable dumb questions I ask you in Discord as I finish building Ravnica Reignited. Bring it on. Gonna make a productive night for us. Hey, as long as you lot are entertained, we're doing our... And we get to a place where we can run more live games for you folks, we're doing our job. DM streams never make progress for the DMs. Yes, accurate. Chad is having fun. That's all that matters. Accurate. Just take the country of Sharon and put it somewhere else. So the reason that we're going to move the entire country of Sharon, and it looks like my bit rate might be fuzzing up a bit, and I apologize. So Sharon is this fantastic minarets and brass towers and advanced technology and powerful magic desert empire that at the time of Casters and Castles is ruled by Sin al-Gawar, the sovereign of fire, one of the 4 elemental gods that shaped the world. Having a sovereign dwelling upon the earth, ruling over mortals, is super weird. And there's lore reasons for why he's doing that. But Sharon comes from a campaign that I ran with Ninja Man Matt 12 years ago. 12-ish plus minus years ago. And there's a whole story there, but the problem is most of that story takes place on the Western continent. And we're incorporating that into our lore, possibly fiction at some point. And so we're going to have to explain how these heroes got from the Western continent to the Eastern continent just in the early Iron Age. There are plenty of magical reasons to do so. Like, it's not that hard to say, oh, they magically travel. But from a conservation of detail perspective, if you don't have to have supernatural travel over thousands of miles, if they can just go to the neighboring kingdom, I feel like that's better. Unless you have a really damn good reason for it. So we're moving the country of Sharon. We are going to replace this with mostly a wasteland. We're not going to put another world power there because that's going to give this place Aberatum, which is the pearl in the crown of the world. This fantastic city where you can find anything, anyone, this huge trade city. And we're going to make that the preeminent power, because by having Sharon and Aberatum in the same space, it sort of made it difficult to justify why Aberatum is such a big deal. So we're probably going to revamp a lot of this geography to make Aberatum more central, and we'll go from there. Eat the kingdom. You're nerfing the power. Which power? The power of Sharon? Not sure. All right, where were we? We're going to go kingdom level. Yeah, of the places. Yeah, so I think it's completely reasonable for there to be that level of high magic where you travel across the world, but I just like narrative continuity and conservation of detail. If you don't have to say, oh, by the way, then they magically teleport across the world, then don't. That way, when you do have to do that, it's super special. For example, in a story that takes place in the timeline, which we're in I like shrinking the timeline as well. I don't like having there be periods of thousands of years, because then you have to explain why, are you still in medieval stasis? Why hasn't technology advanced more? Why were there castles 10,000 years ago and they're still castles and not spaceships? And you can explain those things. You absolutely can find ways to justify it. But if you have a smaller time scale overall, then your justifications and explanations are easier to use. So I'm doing the same thing with geography. If I can keep all the geography that's relevant to each other in one place, that's better. And if I can have something happen 200 years ago instead of 2,000 years ago, that's better, in my opinion. Look at the real world. 200 years ago, it's almost unrecognizable, right? If you had a ghost in your house from 100 years ago, that's a long time ago. You don't need it to be a 10,000-year-old ghost. 100 years is a long time. A lot of stuff changes. So I think that when possible, if you do that, you can make your wondrous things truly wondrous. Right? 100 years is plenty scary. All right, so I destroy, and so here's what we're going to do. This area is all hills right now, but there's no reason it has to be hills. We are going to change this out, isometric columns. We're going to change this out to make a larger lake. Magic and tech don't mix well. Why invent tech when you have magic? So if you're going to go down that line of thinking, in my opinion, you need to move. You don't have to do anything, right? This is all made up. It's all fairy tales. You can do whatever you want. But there's a certain degree of verisimilitude. Am I saying that right? That I enjoy in my games, where it feels just real enough to make sense. And so in my head, if you're going to say, well, they don't advance technology because they have magic, then you have a couple of options. One option is you make magic super difficult or rare, or you shroud it in ignorance. And that's kind of what Warhammer 40k does. Warhammer 40k, a lot of the high tech that exists is not understood. It's from a previous era, and people worship it and they treat it with religious fervor, meaning they don't truly understand it, and they have barriers against trying to take it apart and reverse engineer it. You have to pray to the machine spirit and anoint it with the sacred cleaning oils. They don't understand that that's actually maintaining the machine and upgrading it. So if you do that, you can prevent the inevitable march of progress. If you don't do that and you do have magic, I don't know if the existence of magic, it depends on the kind of magic in your world. I don't know that it makes people less inventive, creative, and most importantly of all, it doesn't change the fact that people will always try to find an edge. If they can get an edge from something, they're going to try to get it. So that means that people are always going to be inventing and developing things, because that gives you an advantage over the next kingdom, the next knight, the next town, whatever. And if that's the case, why hasn't magic completely changed the fabric of your society? You see this in some places, Ravnica, Eberron. You get into that real magitech environment where people, if they have magical power sources, they invent railroads, because that is a efficient way to do stuff. Railways are an efficient energy use, right? So they haven't developed tech, but they've developed inventive ways to get more out of their magic, because magic is a fact of life. If your magic can make crops grow fertile and cure diseases, and you're not factoring that into your world building and how that changes society around you, then either magic, you have a world where magic is mysterious and it kind of has a sense of wonder about it, and it's not just, oh, go down to the potion shop and pick up some potions, or society should change drastically from a medieval style world. Medieval times would have been completely different if people could teleport around and spy on you with crystal balls and all that stuff. It would have changed warfare, it would have changed statecraft, it would have changed agriculture and industry. So if you don't make magic have those changes on the world, then either you're asking people to just ignore it, or you've got a very like Merlin, Camelot, Lord of the Rings style world where magic is this unearthly force. So what I was saying is that this sort of slides you towards the Tippyverse, which I highly recommend as a thought exercise. The Tippyverse is a world designed for 3rd edition, 3.5, that takes magic, and as it works in D&D 3rd edition, it takes magic to its logical extremes. So you end up with super cities based around teleportation with all their needs magically provided for, and then wasteland outside, because if you aren't in one of these super cities, people can just teleport in and kill you with high-powered magic. It's a really interesting thought exercise. It's a very different world than what we experience, right? It really shows what people would do if the rules of D&D were real and part of their lives, and not just the rules of this game we make up. All right, let me catch up with chat. I've been ranting. If you incorporate a subterranean river, you could put all kinds of weird shit in there, and it could become another adventure zone. Just saying. I think I am going to incorporate an underground river. I'm still going to make a lake, because I think it just makes sense for the catchment area to produce a lake that's larger, but I do think I'll create a subterranean river, and it's going to be real weird. I like that idea. Sounds like Magisterium. Yeah, so if you have a Magisterium style from his Dark Materials, Golden Compass, then you can explain why society hasn't developed more sophisticated technology. If we had castles 1400 years ago and we still have castles, why is there no gunpowder? You can say that gunpowder doesn't exist in your world. There's a lot of things you can do, but what I'd prefer to do is not have to jump through those hoops. I prefer, like, if I was really playing hardball, all the adventures taking place in casters and castles, there'd be no plate mail. People would have chainmail. They would have no stirrups. Most warriors would use round wooden shields. It'll be a lot more like Viking era, early Dark Ages tech. There'd be no crossbows, all that other stuff. This much more Beowulf, primitive, warrior kings, outside is scary, the Roman Empire just fell sort of feeling to it. I'm not enforcing that in casters and castles because I want people... It's important to me to be a good ambassador of the game. I want people to roll up and say, oh, this is in the player's handbook and it's cool, I want to play that. And instead of me saying, well, actually, crossbows hadn't been invented yet, or, well, actually, in my world, there are no elves, which is not the case, but you get the idea. I want people to be able to just play the thing that is fun. But if I was writing fiction of casters and castles, we would be just shortly after the fall of Rome, and technology would be much more primitive. iRobot. The entrance could be something cool like a sinkhole or an underground. I agree. Mortal Engines, the RPG, it kind of ends up like Mortal Engines, except instead of the cities moving around, you've got these cities that just they use teleport circles to just strike, and they don't send armies anymore. What good is an army of rank and file when you have when you have spellcasters who can mass produce wands of fireball? So all warfare is this incredibly high stakes strike team teleporting magical assassins and madness. So what kind of fish can I catch at this fishing village? All right. On that note, let's get back to it. Let me see if... I am not convinced. Yeah, I think that the last lore stream I did was on my tower, which is currently rest in peace. Super unlucky. Open air ruins, like an old city block of the ancient city with a few of the buildings buried under a fallen aqueduct. Yeah. No, that makes sense. All right. So... we were building this, first off, we're going to fix this lake. We're going to fix this lake. We're going to make it much more reasonable. And then, is this the right color water? No. Is this the right color water? Yeah, that's it. We're going to make this lake a lot more reasonable, but not fully. And then we're going to say there's an underwater, like it drains off underwater. How much of this lore do you think will really be used in the game? So, a lot of this is foolishness that I do because it makes me happy and because at some point I want to create works of fiction. And a lot of this will have nothing to do with actual adventure content. And some of this is for just having an interesting conversation with chat and world building as an exercise. Yeah, so this world is like my project, and I'm fine if I build something and then the players blow it up. When I am just sitting down to create an adventure or an adventure sandbox, I try to be extremely player focused. I try to make sure that there are characters here who are relevant to the players, and there are plot hooks here relevant to the players, and there's interesting things here for the players to do. And much of the rest of this is just to keep myself entertained. So I'm not thinking about doing a true West Marches campaign with multiple DMs at this point. Outside of the fact that on this channel we've already kind of done that. When Bren has DM'd a few adventures, I try to work them into the ongoing narrative of the story. So I'm less thinking like a true West Marches with a group of DMs and more like, hey, we have a recurring show, we've got guest stars, we've done it in the past, it's called Tales from the Golden Bough, and all those adventures take place in this area. So it's like a recurring area that I can use for multiple campaigns. And yeah, it is the nice thing about knowing it is easy to go down. If you're just saying I want to play D&D with my friends, then a lot of this is nonsense, and a lot of this is not like, unless it brings you joy as the dungeon master and the world builder, it's absolutely not necessary for running a game. But it is important that you are also having fun. There's a lot of things in my campaign that entertain me. I'll put references to lore that I think is cool while still making sure that I'm not waving that, ooh, look at this reference you don't get and I do because I'm the dungeon master, in my players' faces, right? I can allude to something, they're like, ooh, that's mysterious, I wonder what it is, and I don't need to really overplay it, but I know that I put some of the world building in there, makes me happy. Where's the statue commemorating the glorious Aaron Vol? I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that, dude. We'd have to figure out what city's fighting pits you were working out of. I've also been thinking, man, if you're down during quarantine, I want to revisit that. I want to pick up where we left off, in the middle of the Sky Kingdom, completely racked by wild magic and insanity. I'm trying to think, what city would he have been from? So if Aaron Vol, in our last adventure, they went here, they went through here. If you're down, I am 100% down. We can have Bren play Alika. I'll shoot you a DM. We're all sitting at home going mad, bit by bit. I'll get you in DMs. I'd love to get that campaign back together for a one-shot, or a couple, a miniseries. I think that Aaron Vol most likely was a pit fighter in Striddenmarl, which is the capital of the Kingdom of Vercinget, or in Vainweirden, which is the capital of the city of Galadron. Those are the big, like, metropolis capitals. They would have had a lot of fighting pits and such. So we'll touch base and I'll leave that up to you. And depending on how adventures go, maybe we can get another statue in the town square. Yeah, so when they ended that adventure, by the way, for those of you who didn't watch it, they had... What did they even accomplish? They opened the Vault of Clouds and they got the relic that they were... That's right, they got Dotun's dagger. They got the knife that could pierce illusions that they need to get into the hidden city of Cryas. While they're at it, though, Lysha the druid has a paranoid fear of nature in all of its forms, terrified that it's out to get her. Johnny the Wise went mad and tried to kill them all. I think Aaron's mostly unaffected because he doesn't cast a lot of magic. And Alan O'Dale, Sideshow's character, his brain was erased, and then he was inhabited by the spirit of an ancient archmage, back to back. Yeah. So, essentially, the lot of you are on top of the clouds with severe mental trauma. I've been thinking about where we go from there for a while now. I think I'll hit you up. I would love to put something together. And that all took place over here at Dotun's Rock. Get an airship and bail. I'd be curious, would you folks even continue the quest to get the Book of Dawn, or would you just dip and try to, like, flee and go back to your old lives? Chat would have to promise to stop telling Aaron Vol to frag kids in order for that to happen. Yeah, the acts of God went wild. We've retooled the system since then for acts of God. It's still fun, but it's a little less hectic. You would not have wanted to been in the last campaign, dude. Bren's character literally was just random magic. Just random magic, random magic, random magic, one after the other. Also, he summoned... They showed up at Doton's Rock like a week after your adventure, except they nearly blew the whole place up, and they summoned a giant fuck-off dragon from another world who is now running the joint, so... It's fun times. That is one of the fun things about this. I like all the adventures taking place in the same world, even if they're with different groups. What if you expand on Golden Bough as an outlying town's tavern? Or is Golden Bough already something? So the Golden Bough is... It's kind of like the World Serpent Inn from old school D&D. It's this magical tavern that if you know the secret knock and you have the little special token, a little coin, you can get to the Golden Bough from any place of merriment, any ale hall, theater, house of ill repute, any place where there's just a party going on. You can open the door and you can enter the Golden Bough. It's the tavern between the worlds. Technically, you're not supposed to be able to go into the Golden Bough and then exit. Like if you went in somewhere in the city of Romar and you entered the Golden Bough, and someone else came in from Stridenmarl up here, you could share a drink together, but when you went outside, you'd both come back the way you went. You wouldn't be able to enter in one door and exit out in another place. You always come out the door you came in. Absolutely. It's the weird tavern. It's Mos Eisley on steroids. It's the fantasy Mos Eisley. You can go in there and you can find demons and angels drinking because they can't harm each other. No harm is possible within the Golden Bough. And the barkeep can yeet people out the door just by telling them, "Get out of my pub!" They automatically get flung out the door and the door shut behind them and they can't find their way back. So we basically set it up. You know what? I'll be honest. We really set that place up. I used it in a previous campaign that I ran in Anacra, which is technically set like 3,000 years in the future, but we're not going to worry about that. And it's heavily inspired by Dresden Files. It is a corded neutral ground. It's the place where mortal enemies can meet and talk, and they can't backstab each other. You can get banned from the Golden Bough. The barkeep's yeet sheet is like Crozan's yeet sheet, but times 5. Yes. It is fantasy cheers. And that's why I use the Golden Bough as the uniting device for all the side campaigns, because any adventure can start there. Anyone could be there for any reason. It's just, okay, you all meet in a tavern. It's the old adventuring cliche of, you all start in a tavern, but codified. In my last campaign, the last campaign I ran before Overwatch League 2019, which is when we were doing, because I used to run games at home in San Diego on Sundays, and in the 2019 season, shows were on Saturdays and Sundays, so I couldn't run games at home anymore on the weekends for all my friends with normal grown-up jobs. So in that campaign, one of the characters had a special bond with the Laughing God, also known as Lady Luck, also known as Fortune's father, who's this very mysterious deity recognized all over the world in various guises. The deity of wine and song and having a good time and all that. And so he got the deed to the Golden Bough, and he got to run it during the campaign. You having a giggle, mate lord. Exactly. Exactly. See, that's the thing. It's a cliche for a reason. It's a good... like, there's nothing wrong with starting in a tavern. Yep. Everyone just gets drunk. So what I'm thinking is that if we create an adventuring space, I was going to do this lake, which again doesn't really matter for creating an adventure, but it's interesting to me, so I'm going to make a lake. We're going to make a lake. Then we're going to make an actually useful thing for adventures. Okay, so 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. We'll edit these rivers in a moment. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50. Makes like evaporates it because of Chardalon. Yeah. Yeah, a Chardalon is a little bit of a problem, isn't he? Alright, let's fix these rivers. I'm going to leave the elven city of Nenri where it is. I like that. Let's fix these rivers. This river can actually... You know what? I'm actually going to leave them for now because deleting is a pain. I'll clean them up later. They work for the time being. So Nenri is a Dawn Elf city. In Anacra, the High Elves are called Dawn Elves. I think we had this talk last time. They have a little bit in common with your Elder Scrolls, Somerset Elves, the ones who... what are they called? The Tallow, or the... You know who I'm talking about. The asshole fascist elves who think humans suck. The Dawn Elves, the Alfar, for the most part, are not like that. But they do remember the world before it was the physical matter and spiritual matter were separated. They have very fond memories of that time. So they shroud themselves in all sorts of finery and elegance and magic and fairy wonder. They sing sad songs about the Dawn era. They are students of wizardry. Most of them see themselves as mentors and tutors to the younger peoples, humans and the like. The Alfar of Nenri have a somewhat different approach, which is to enchant, mind control, and enslave people. So it's this beautiful city of crystal and wood, and it's all built on top of this water, and it's lovely, and it's powered by magic, and if you go there, your mind will be wiped and you'll be enslaved. It's this weird fairy tale fascist state. Again, hashtag not all Alfar. Most Alfar aren't like this, but the Alfar of Nenri are. They will enchant you if you enter their borders, and they will re-educate you. Yeah, the Altmare. They're the Altmare. Yeah. So here's what we did. We made a lake that's about 50 hexes instead of 100 hexes. And we have underground rivers. And these underground rivers lead into a series of spooky tunnels, which for now I'm just going to say they're spooky tunnels. They're very spooky. And because they're underneath this lake where... Oh, and Elmspire is a Eladrin kingdom. This is where, again, Mika's character is from. And there's a great evil imprisoned inside of a tree in Elmspire. So it's a very spooky forest, and the Eladrin and the Huldra, the Dusk Elves, the Wood Elves who dwell there, are all wardens and guardians keeping away the spooky evil that's locked inside the spooky tree. So you've got this weird magic over here, you've got this weird magic over here. That makes for all the water, the subterranean tunnels, and the underground river are incredibly spooky. Yes. So, that's done. We fixed this problem. This is good. I think this makes sense. We'll fix the rivers later. We'll probably add some rivers from these mountaintops feeding into it as well. Eventually it goes into the Gluck, which is a troll city. The trolls have their own civilization there. And all the corpses from dead adventurers in Romar. Exactly. All right, great. So we fixed that problem. So, so let's move on to... yeah, chat dwells in Gluck. There's a bunch of orcs and trolls in this area. They have their own civilization. They're actually members of Lyteri. And Lyteri is a confederation of independent city-states that bind together in what's called the League of Chieftains for mutual protection. They're one of the big three kingdoms in this war going on. Okay, so let's do something. That's where all Darius's disadvantage stems from. Exactly, the troll swamp. So let's do something that is actionable and adventure ready, because I completely lost my beautiful, crappily drawn map that I was working on last time of the city of Romar. We had mapped it out during sort of the Paleolithic era and the super early before the Demonic Imperium started. So let's just work on a city. Let's work on an outlying town. Now, we have some choices. We have some choices of what outlying town we want to make. Darius goes to defeat his disadvantage. So here's the complicated problem. Darius is actually not in this world. The Descent into Avernus campaign does not take place in Anacra. It is the only campaign I'm running that we run on this channel at all. No, aside from Doa. Doa ran the Ashlands Pact. That takes place in his world. And this is Anacra, which is the world that I work on and Ninja Man Matt has worked on a lot. And the Descent into Avernus campaign takes place in the Forgotten Realms, in Baldur's Gate. So that's the one thing I run that isn't in my own content. So, for those of you who have not been with us for some of the previous streams, Romar is the biggest, and I'm actually going to just upgrade this real quick. We're going to replace Romar with a city instead of a town, because it is a city. He could still go looking for his disadvantage. It just wouldn't be here. So, a brief overview. We have, and let's see if I can get rid of the grid. There we go, get rid of the grid. The Northern Kingdoms, aka it's totally not Europe. The Northern Kingdoms are at war. Previously, the Kingdom of Galadron had sway over the entire land. Isn't that the whole mechanic of if it exists in D&D, it exists in Anacra? The solution is simple. We get Darius written into D&D lore. Yes, we just need to get him in the next Splat book, just like the Critical Role setting Wildemont. Easy. Barely an inconvenience. So we have these kingdoms, Galadron, Vercingetorix, and Lyteri, that are at war. And Odasvale is directly between the three of them. Critical Role? Yeah, the latest official Wizards of the Coast published adventure setting is Wildemont, which is in the world of... Damn it. What's the world called? What's the actual world called? Because Wildemont's a continent. Anyways, you get the idea. Critical Role is now an officially published campaign setting by Wizards of the Coast. I have heard that the Explorer's Guide to Wildemont is it's not just because a lot of people are fans of Critical Role. I've heard that as a campaign book, it's really well put together and very player forward, which I like. Also, Joe Manganiello's character, Archon the Cruel, is in Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. That was the first hint people got that, wait a minute, something that happened in Critical Role is now canon with a capital C. So, Exandria, thank you, Exandria. Exandria is canon. And actually, that is another point. Anacra does not share the same cosmology as the other D&D worlds. You don't have the Nine Hells, the Abyss, all that stuff in Anacra. But Anacra is supposed to be its own world, its own set of worlds, its own multiverse that technically exists in the same omni-cosmos as the other D&D settings. Which is how, if you want Asmodeus or Orcus or something in an Anacra game, you just say, yeah, Asmodeus was one of the Infernals that crossed the Hungry Darkness in the early eras, so he's here, and he's set up camp, and he's got his own domain in the underworld that looks a lot like the Nine Hells. So, I mean, Darius could make the jump. It's possible. There's a lot working against it, but it is doable, and it has happened before. Good evening to you. Right, so canon is what happens at your table, in my opinion. Like, your Forgotten Realms is not my Forgotten Realms. So whatever the DM says happens at their table is canon. But there is this meta-canon that Wizards of the Coast offers, in which Forgotten Realms, Exandria, Eberron, Ravnica, they're all out there and they're all accessible to each other. Did stream died? Stream is dead. Please stand by. Tangents and dragons. Yep. All right. Are we live? Look live. We should be back. I'm going to try very hard not to say anything interesting for a couple of moments. I'll give it my best shot not to be interesting until we've given everyone a chance to refresh. So yeah, I mean, canon is a loose concept as is. There is an implication in an official Wizards of the Coast product that a character from Critical Role appears in a Forgotten Realms adventure. My intention in Anacra is not, like, when I run an Anacra campaign, I don't have a lot of cross-pollination between Anacra and other settings. I don't have Orcus, for example. I have my own Archfiends. I have my own gods, my own cosmology, all that stuff. But when I'm designing Anacra from a for other people to play in perspective, which obviously, like all well, okay, not all DMs, but you know, it's the standard self-aggrandizing goal is to make Anacra a viable product for people to play. The idea is that at your table, Anacra is yours and it's not mine. I get to decide what is official and what is canon, but at your table, if you want Dritz Do'Urden tearing up across Vercingetorix, go ahead, it's your table. And if you need an excuse or explanation in the rulebook, it's that Anacra exists in the larger cosmos, but it has certain defenses designed to keep things from other worlds out. But those have been broken before, so if it's your table and you want something, you do it. Rule 0 always applies. All right, let's take a look at what we were doing. So Odasvale is our setting of our sandbox. It's where we're going to be playing our campaigns. It's where we've actually already played a few games from Tales from the Golden Bough, which have already had in-game lore consequences. The Kingdom of Galadron used to rule almost everything. Their line of kings has died. There's a succession war going on right now, during which Vercingetorix and Lyteri have risen up to reclaim their own identity. At the crux of this lies the Valley of Odasvale. It's about the size of England, if you do the math. It's large. It's largely arable land. It's very fertile. It's got a lot of rivers running through it. The stream just probably died. No, the stream didn't die. Yeah, Anacra's version of the crystal spheres is the firmament, and it functions in a very similar capacity. Yep. That's, who knows what interwebs are running through. I'm running this whole thing off my laptop because my PC is still press F to pay respects. So, Odasvale is very fertile land, high value target, very defensible. It's surrounded on this side by mountains and by the forests of the elves. So these are all powerful borders, and then these woods are they're not completely unexplored, but they're definitely contested. There's monsters and all sorts of things. It's hard to build a huge civilization in the woods. So all this arable land is being tilled, and it used to have a duke, or it still has a duke, who was loyal to the Kingdom of Galadron. With Galadron falling, now Odasvale is sort of left to its own devices to make some decisions about its future. The city of Romar lies at its heart, and I've been working a great deal on the lore of Romar because my idea was to make Romar the adventure hub. But now I'm thinking I want to do a little bit more of the Matt Colville thing and I want to create a smaller adventure hub where, going back to some points that were made in chat earlier, we focus less on fluff and lore and world building and more on actionable and adventurable. We create a shared adventure hub on the edge of civilization with lots of adventure hooks. We give people the opportunity to explore out from there, use it as a home base, build organizations, and influence the lives of this small community. Make that an adventure hub. And then from there, we can continue to work on Romar so we can have some adventures set in the big city, dealing with the politics of who will Odasvale align with. And also, the Duke doesn't have complete sway over the valley. With the kingdom falling, all the nobles, the barons, and local knights, they're all looking at each other and eyeing each other and trying to decide who's the real authority. A lot of them are weighing their options. Maybe they're going to go here, maybe they're going to go there. So there's a lot. The political situation in Odasvale is fraught, and I'd like to mine that for adventure, but I think I'm going to start by picking a little town, a little village on the border somewhere, the border of civilization. So the initial problems our adventurers deal with will not be that Lord Furfenwaffle is incurring upon Lord Fluffingstein's land, and they have to go settle that out. As much as I like that stuff, I want to have some more classic, ooh, there's monsters in the woods adventures, and then we'll move into the political nonsense. It would give a good contrast to Romar's atmosphere as well. Exactly. What is located in the yellow below and to the right of Odasburg? This is Nenri. So originally, when they just had this small lake, this is the Elven lands, the High Elves. It's a forbidden, magical, spooky forest. And I haven't fully detailed their political borders yet, but they control this area. And the Dusk Elves control this area. They do not allow humans in their lands. So what you were saying earlier about canon works, it's like how in comic books so-and-so could be from one country and then someone else writes one separately where they're from somewhere else. Basically, yeah. Wizards of the Coast in their published material gets to decide Archon the Cruel is canonically in... I don't want to give us spoilers because we've got some people playing the campaign. He is canonically someone you can interact with in Baldur's Gate, Descent into Avernus, a Forgotten Realms adventure, even though his adventure took place in the world of Exandria from Critical Role. In Baldur's Gate, Descent into Avernus, he has the Hand of Vecna, which he got in Critical Role. The Hand of Vecna is an item that has been canon in... And again, D&D canon is a furball. It's wild. But that's been canon since like the 70s and 80s. So they wrote it into their books. So if you're just going with what Wizards of the Coast puts in their books, Archon the Cruel is a character and that world is a character. But like at my table, it's up to me. At your table, it's up to you. And no one's going to stop you. If you can give me some other indicator of what area you're talking about, Shadzar, then I will try to point that out to you. A lot of these little political borders were just me saying, hey, there's a baron who rules this land. You know, these are the different power centers in Odasvale. The Duke does not have... The way feudalism works, the Duke's power extends as far as everyone thinks it does. And as far as the Duke's armies, and as far as when the Duke says, it's time to mount up, all you barons who swore an oath, bring me your armies, how many of them actually follow through on that? That's how feudalism works. It's not a, oh, of course I will obey. It's a question. So the idea is all these different borders are different political centers. The hexes can be numbered. It is messy. And it can slow down the system quite a bit. It doubles redraw time. Below the E in Odasvale, this region right here. Yeah, I haven't detailed this yet. This is a barony of some sort. Again, this is a barony of some sort. This is a barony. This is Nenri, the High Elven Kingdom. This is a barony. This is a barony. And I'm going to... the idea is to continue to expand these out. I use some kingdom building rules originally from Pathfinder, converted to 5th edition when I want to do this stuff mathematically. But for the time being, all those different borders, those are just baronies that I haven't done a whole lot with yet. It would make sense that a group of a border town on the edge of the protective barrier being sandwiched by two of the kingdoms. That's sort of the question here. The question here is, if we're going to pick a starting area, I want the starting area to be near a wilderness zone, a zone that is not under anyone's real control, is full of monsters. One sec. Running my mouth. Gotta get some more water at some point. So I want to pick somewhere definitely along the edges of the valley. I like the idea of it being at the border of two kingdoms so that strife can be realized. That idea of this political turmoil can be very, not abstract, but obvious and physical material to the people involved. In WC Tim, it would make sense that a group of adventurers would have to prove themselves by taking care of some local problems before they could be trusted to go settle more serious matters. Yeah, that's the great thing about setting an adventure in a small town. The reason that I wanted to start with Romar is because I am having an absolute blast running Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus as a city-based sandbox. I don't know if my players in the campaign with Darius are ever going to make it to Avernus, because they're having so much fun in Baldur's Gate. And even as Lobies in Baldur's Gate, there's a lot to do. There's small problems to solve. Just because you're in a big city doesn't mean there aren't little things to do. There's all these districts to explore with tons of adventure hooks. I'd love to run a game like that in Anacra. But a lot of work went into building up Baldur's Gate as an adventure playground, and it's going to take a lot of work to get Romar built up to be an adventure playground, so it's easier to build a small town. But you are right in that there's a classic progression from we are the heroes of this small border town and then getting swept up in the adventures in the big city. That is a classic arc, and we are going to use that because despite all these tangents that we're on, which I'm honestly having a lot of fun with, despite all these tangents, we are working eventually towards an adventuring-focused sort of material. As far as the Duke is willing to march his personal armies, yes, the Duke's power is limited by actual armies and whether or not they muster, and which of the Duke's barons and knights and stuff believe in the Duke's power and will show up. Power is often an illusion. You have as much power as people think you have. Yes, Yosef, the tall gnome. Woo! Between the blue and the yellow there in the mountains, Hatfield and McCoy-style conflict. That is a good idea. So we've got a few options. Let's talk about what surrounds Odasvale. Up here we have Gomo's Gap, which is named after an ancient general of the demonic Imperium. And these lands are largely held by Vercinget loyalists, and I think that there's Galadronian loyalists here. So you've got wide plains. It's going to be heavily populated. I haven't finished dotting out all the little towns and stuff, but you can assume if it's arable land, someone's farming it. That's how it mostly worked in the medieval era. If it was possible to farm, someone was farming it. So if we go up in this area, we're going to have a lot of that political conflict. Then we have the Sonril Mountains. I don't know anything about the Sonril Mountains. I don't know if I've made any notes about the Sonril Mountains or if I just picked the name Sonril and plucked it and just dropped it right there. So if we have our adventure here in this little town at the foot of the mountains, mountains are a great place to have adventures because you can have mines and like the mountains are forbidden and they're spooky and all sorts of monsters live there, and just over the mountains are these hills, and you could have like a baron here and a baron, and it feels a lot more feasible to have a conflict between these two warring barons. And then you can have factions in this town that are loyal to one or the other that the players can bounce off of. So this is a great option. Beyond here, you've got the mysterious woods of the Holdra, the wood elves, fairies, and all that sort of stuff. And that's close enough here to have an impact without being like, oh, you're going to be killing elves. Because the elves aren't supposed to be evil or even hostile, they're just unfriendly. So this is a prime location. You're also close enough to Nenri to have this mysterious legend of the mind-controlling enchanters who dwell in this magical fairy city on the water, but not so close that you're actually dealing with it. Whereas if we pick this, like right here, you got wood elves, you got dawn elves, so it's elf city. So I think I like this better. Along here, if you cross over, you've got Lyteri and the tiefling city of Helmlight. And these woods and hills. Hills are also another great adventure zone. In a really good sandbox, like if you have forest, then hills, then mountains, and you can make each of them tougher one after the other, that works pretty well, I think. So this would be decent. The Flint's Wood is home to gnolls. There are a lot of gnolls and other scary... It's not Mirkwood, but it's definitely like a scary, scary place. You've got the Dwarves of Kexel up here. So another important thing we have to talk about for Odasvale is an adventure we ran on Tales from the Golden Bough. There was... The adventurers successfully cobbled together a spell that for... Nobody knows how long it's going to last or really how long it works, but the land of Odasvale is protected from the dragon Ashardalon, who rules from Dotan's Rock and is spreading terror and destruction across the land. So Odasvale is magically shielded from this world-destroying dragon, which is going to make it extremely interesting to worldly powers who would like to not get destroyed by the world-destroying dragon. You know, there's arguments... I honestly feel like this is a great place for adventures, because you can sort of escalate, right? You go, okay, we're going to have adventures in this little town, and the big town over here and the big town over here, they're sort of competing for its loyalty, and it's at the foot of the mountains, but these are forested mountains, so we could build in those adventure zones of Forest Hills Mountains. We could have some threats coming in from over the mountains. We could have them have to deal with all this. I think this is going to be our target. I think this is definitely going to be our target. Could move the town between the two baronies. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. We move this here. We'd have to move it like here. Let's move it here. Let's do that. So here's what we'll do. We'll change the terrain. We will put a forest hex. Ren would somehow start a full-blown orange versus blue war. Yes, he would. Fun fact, there is a statue of Tiberius Wanderstave in Romar. Okay, so we're going to put this town in this hex right here. But I also want to change the hexes, because right now, even though it's equidistant between the two places, it's a lot easier to get from here to here. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to change the terrain type. The statue? Tiberius, in one of his early adventures, so one of the fun things about the last campaign with Tiberius is he wrote, and I wrote a whole bunch of famous deeds that he accomplished during his life. And Bren did not even know all of them because he was playing a senile character. So at one point, he had his name was Tiberius Wanderstave. He was one of the main characters of the last campaign. And I gave everyone little notes on their backstory, but I gave him an envelope full of shredded notes, just single pieces of information, to replicate the fact that his memory was hazy. So we've sprinkled in references to all the heroic deeds he's done, and all the offspring he's fostered, or all of his progeny across the land. So there is a statue of him in Romar. He helped protect them from gnolls. How large is each hex? Each hex is 12 miles across. It was a lot of fun, and he would just draw from it, and some of them were useful, some of them were like cryptic, and some of them were completely useless. Just random raunchy bits of information that he had. So we're going to put mountains here, and instead, I don't want to do the mountain, the on stilts village necessarily. It's a cool idea, and I might do it part of the way, but in the starter town, I want it to be it's normalcy, right? The starter town this is the last place where things are normal. Crack and loop, that is exactly it. Out of context, that is exactly the random piece of information that he pulled up. So we're going to make this a deciduous... No, we're going to make this... Yeah, so this is in the hills. This town is in the hills, and it's the edge of the forest. So when you go into this town, it's nestled by the mountains on either side, and you can follow the hills. So you can go through the hills to cut to here, and it's a slow going, or you can go around the mountain, or you can go around the mountain this way to this town. And because it actually ends up being an easier path this way. We'll say there's a mountain pass that you can go through that connects this town to this town and this town to this town. All right, so we're going to need a place to keep some notes, because it's time to start just drafting up basic notes and random ideas about this setting. So we need a new dock, and it is time to brainstorm. Brainstorming, Sandbox Town. All right, give me 1 sec. We will move this over. Boop. All right. Brainstorming, Sandbox Town. All right. Here's what we know about this town. It is in the foothills, at the edge of the forest. Mountains loom in the distance. Progressive danger. Forest, hills, mountains. So for a good sandbox, we're going to do almost like World of Warcraft style zones. And the further you get from the town, the more dangerous they get. Tangents and Dragons. I mean, it's still technically lore and chill, right? But we might rename it that. That would make sense. That should be the playlist at least. Okay. Tankers and Tangents. No tankers. I've been drinking whiskey. Whiskey and world building. Okay, what else do we know about it? Between two baronies. Baronies are bitter rivals. Feud. Hatfield and McCoy's. Furthermore, I think if we're trying to bring this political struggle to life, then we ought to have one barony be not necessarily loyal, but aligned with one of the kingdoms, and the other barony be aligned with the other kingdom. And this is one of those distinctions. I'll just do a quick little swapperoo. Swoop. This is one of those distinctions that may not matter a whole lot to the locals. The locals just want to make sure that they can continue to farm, that they're protected from monsters, all that jazz. Let's see. So we have Romar, and Romar is the heart of Odasvale, and Odasvale as a whole is trying to decide, should it remain loyal to Galadron even though there's no king? Should they throw in their lot with the kingdom of Vercinget? Or should they join Lyteri and the League of Chieftains? And yes, absolutely. I agree. So we're going to have representatives from, there's basically 4 factions, right? 4 factions on the meta scale of Odasvale. We've got we'll call them independents, but they're not like patriots who are pushing for independence. They're more like, let's just take care of ourselves and our own. We don't need to swear loyalty to any foreign king. You've got the Galadronian loyalists, the Vercinget rebels, and the Lyteri dissidents. Yeah, that's the 4th option. That's 100% the 4th option. So we've got 4 factions, and those 4 factions, I was building like literal groups, political groups aligned with each of these 4 options in Romar. But we're going to do a small scale version of them here, because the idea is that the political struggle, if you live in this town all your life, you've never seen the King of Galadron. The King of Galadron lives miles and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away. They barely control this place. The only reason they control this place is because they can threaten to muster an army to invade it. And that's the way it's worked for a couple hundred years. So if you're a local, you don't really give much of a rat's ass about which kingdom you belong to. You don't care about that as much as you care about the actual local power politics. So to the locals, this is very much about the Blue Barony and the Orange Barony. And that's how the struggle is largely portrayed. If you pay attention, though, you might recognize that the Blue Barony is One of these two is aligned with Romar. We could make the blue barony aligned with Romar because it's closer, or we could make them more like we're afraid, like now that the social order's been disrupted, this is our opportunity to flex ourselves, and we don't want Romar controlling us because the king is gone, and without the king, they have no right to actually control us. So we could make the blue kingdom, the blue barony, anti-Romar, and the orange barony pro-Romar. Maybe because the orange barony has to deal, like, see this circle of mountains right here? Thanks for dropping by, dude. Take care. Have a good night. These mountains right here and these hills, they're probably full of monsters, but there's no major world powers up here. Whereas down here, you've got the Huldra, and everyone tells, you know, folk stories about the Huldra stealing babies and stuff like that. And then you've got Nenri, the elves who bring you gifts and offer much if only you'll come home with them and be their mind slaves. So I think I'm going to say that the Orange Barony very much wants Romar's protection. Not as in, we're throwing ourselves at your feet, please protect us, but as in, get your ass down here and do your ducal duty, we are afraid. Whereas the Blue Barony is trying to flex itself. Yeah, so I think the Orange Barony, let's just take some notes here. And I have no names for these yet. I start by just throwing things on the map that make sense, and we come up with names and themes and stuff as we go. The poor elves in Nenri use raised corpses as servants. Rich elves. I like that. I like that a lot. I'm stealing that. Nenri. This will go into another document or world anvil later. Some use animated corpses. It's okay, they're not sentient. Rich and powerful are enchanters who bewitch the living. This one's grandma. Red versus blue. Blue, orange. I just joined the stream, but all your decisions are terrible, and your world sucks. Understandable. Have a nice day, Pesto. Alright. The Blue Barony wants to flex. Doesn't want Romar in charge. And because... Now you said you have to change the color, red versus blue. I mean, that is kind of obvious, right? Even if we moved out of here, they would have two baronies in the middle of a fertile valley. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Moving on. And it doesn't do you any good when I point at the map if I don't switch my sources. I recognize that. Alright, so the Blue Barony wants to flex, doesn't want Romar in charge. I thought we were an autonomous collective. Lycheri's not quite an autonomous collective, but they're along those lines. Alright. Check my phone, make sure I'm not exploding. It's been known to happen to me from time to time. Alright. So. A gulch soaked in blood. Haunted by pumas. Alright, moving on. So the Blue Barony, they don't want Romar in charge. Romar was theoretically used to be aligned with Galadron, the Great Kingdom of Galadron. They were under their authority, and Romar has the most autonomy and power to be in a position to decide its political fate. So logically, the Blue Barony that does not want Romar to run them should throw in their lot with another option. So the Blue Barony, I think, will be Vercinget loyalists. So we've got Vercinget loyalists and Vercinget rebels and Galadronian loyalists. So blue has its own internecine conflict, which is, do we stay loyal to the old kingdom even though it's in shambles, or do we throw in our lot with the rebels to the northeast? Either way, they don't want Romar to rule them. That's the thing. When the king dies, and there's no obvious successor, and it becomes a scramble for power, every landowner, every local power, every subordinate power starts looking out for number one. Some of them might be loyal and hold up to tradition or something like that, but most people say, okay, the social structure is failing. How do I watch my back and come out of this as best as possible? We said we had 4 different factions. We had independents/separatists. We had Galadronian loyalists. We had Vercinget rebels and Lyteri dissidents. Eat the rich. So the Orange Barony, which is farther to the south, they will be our. They want protection from Romar. They want Romar to protect them from Holdra and Alfar. They're afraid of elves. Orange is very fearful of elves because they live with the elves in their backyard. They are further to the south and therefore closer to Lyteri. So we've got Lyteri dissidents, 2 of the factions in each base. Dissidents, and we've got independents. So because they want Romar to protect them, independents. Because they want Romar to protect them, they don't really care who Romar swears loyalty to, because all their lives in living memory, it's been like, oh yeah, there's a king way up north, I promise you, but the Duke has really been the focal point of power, the ducal household. So the Orange Barony doesn't really care about the mighty kingdom far to the north that's in turmoil. All they care about is who's calling the shots in Romar and do they have our back. So Orange tends towards screw all these civil wars and stuff. The people of Odasvale, for ourselves, let's stick together. If Romar wants to call themselves kings, we're cool with it. Just protect us from the spooky elves. And then because they're closer to Lyteri, they've also got Lyteri dissidents who say, hey, we should be a series of independent city-states, each able to determine our lives our own way, but bounded by a pact of mutual defense. So that way, of the 4 factions, 2 of them are embodied in each, and those 2 baronies have their own conflict against each other. So we've got all that, and then we've got the actual fishing village. Do the independents wear coats roughly brown in color? They're not really, at this point, they're not really united yet. It's more of a, most of the independents, they don't have a banner, they don't have a team. They're more just like the folks who say, well, we've got our own problems. Why should we worry about these civil wars? They might coalesce into an actual faction at some point, and there is like a political club in Romar, a guild that espouses that ideology, but it's not really that forward yet. Do we at least have a mascot? All the factions in Romar have mascots, and most of them are named after like the tavern where all these people meet. I think there's the Owlbears, the Pegasi, and 2 others. But again, it's literally like, well, Bob, you know, he owns the Owlbear Inn, and he's a big fan of Vercinget, so all the people who like Vercinget, they call themselves the Owlbears, and, you know, they meet up against the Sharks and the Jets and have snapping fights in the streets. Feral rock gnomes. Those are canon. Those are canon. But these political parties and all their stuff, they haven't really reached this far out of the valley. It's a lot of people sitting around in Romar having angry political conversations. Because, you know, we play D&D to escape from the real world. Owlbears, come out and play! I like it. So what you're telling me is that the feral rock gnomes are terrorizing this. There is nothing stopping us from putting feral... Okay. Screw it. Dangers. Feral rock gnomes. It's done. Alright, so... be the mascots. Galabdur. There could definitely be Galabdur up there. They're kind of mysterious. Every adventure on Castles and Castles now begins with gnomes are terrorizing this small town, tormenting the denizens. Alright. So the way this works, we've got this political background, but again, for most of the folks in this village, that's all abstract. What they care about is feral rock gnomes ate my sheep again. And this Baron's men and this Baron's men are fighting and are like they got into an argument at the pub. And this Baron is threatening to march in and seize our village. And both of the barons want taxes, but who should we actually pay? Could be Sverfneblin. Yes. Sverfneblin? Not sure. So the way it'll work for a burgeoning adventuring party is if they show up level 1 and they aren't really invested in all these politics, nobody picked a noble background, nobody is a veteran of the Civil War, anything like that, they don't really care at all. They roll up into this town and they have these farmers and these miners and their problems. The mine is full of, feral rock gnomes. Somebody stole our sheep. Goblins have kidnapped the blacksmith's daughter. That sort of stuff. They've got these problems, and they're going to say, okay, we're going to talk to the local knight who's in charge, and get some help. And as time goes on, the political underpinnings will come to the foreground because all the NPCs that they involve exist in this context, but that context isn't immediately obvious, and it's not necessarily what the first adventures are about, unless a party member decides to make it about that. And as time goes on, if the village prospers because adventurers are protecting it, it becomes more valuable. Now it becomes more of a priority for these two barons who are at war with each other, or at least squabbling. And now they start, what's a new adventure? Well, this knight just rolled up into town from the Blue Barony, and he's claiming jurisdiction over this area and saying that they need to pay him taxes. And then, the next day, a knight rolled up from the Red Barony and said, hey, it's time to pay your taxes to the one true baron. And those adventures can start to... And then the players, the adventurers, will be like, oh, so there's these two barons who don't like each other. Okay, and as they get more and deeper into those storylines, if they choose to engage, instead of just going off into the mountains to look for Galabdur and feral rock gnomes, then they might be like, oh, this baron, he's trying to decide, he hates the barony of the Blue Barony, and he's got his own agenda going on, but also some of his ministers think that he should stay loyal to Galadron, and it can go from there. But what we really need at the start, we've got this context, but we just need a place for adventures to happen. A dingo ate my baby. Precisely. On the external drive that's dead. No, this is the sort of stuff that I'll remember. I am writing down some of this, but a lot of what I'm talking about with the escalation of the political complexity, I just sort of do that. Because I know that this stream hasn't been a great example because we've been going off on tangents and doing a lot of DM nonsense that the players don't care about. But when it comes to putting content in front of my players, I know level 1 players, especially new level 1 players who don't watch all the VODs and don't watch all the world building streams, they're just showing up with their dice and they're happy to be here. All they need is, here's a problem with treasure at the end, go solve it. And there's a natural progression in the design that leads from this to this to this to this. So I'm actually not too worried about writing out this flowchart. That's a thing that will happen naturally. So what we do need, however, is an actual town. All right, so we've got our notes. Yeah, we've got our notes. So now what we need to do is a few things. We need to build this town to be adventurer friendly, and we need to do this in a way that is going to make it, and I'm not going to do a map right now because I'm actually really bad at maps. Not my forte at all. I'm going to abstract this. We'll build a map from it later. So, the town is named Ottawa. No. Town, notes, and details. Does the town have a local deity? So, okay, actually, that's a great segue. Thank you. The way this works, a town has to have... What is an adventuring town? Let's start out with what an adventure hub town needs. Like, as a game design element, before we get into the lore, let's talk about game design. The town needs to have a tavern / meeting place. A place to sleep. Absolutely. It needs a shrine / temple because there needs to be a source of magical healing. There needs to be a holy quest giver for holy types. A village chief house. We're going to do classic feudalism. There is a knight who lives in this town. Manor house for the knight. Now, because there's a knight, and a knight is ostensibly a fairly high-level fighter, shouldn't the knight be out solving this town's problems? The knight is almost certainly off at the war, right? Like we need to have enough high-level NPCs around to keep the players in check if they go completely off the rails and make the town seem reasonable, but not to take away the spotlight from our heroes. Our heroes still need to be called to action, and if they're like, well, why doesn't this guy do it? Then we failed. So we need a manor house for the knight. We'll also have a reeve or mayor who sort of takes care of the town when the knight is away at the wars. We need a general store. We need a blacksmith for arms and armor. Is there gold in them there hills? We need a merchant. Yeah, so the general store, we're going to have a general store where things are sold, but we are also going to have wandering merchants. Because if we're running this like a sandbox, there should be times when the wandering merchant is going to be in town and there will be special wares available more than usual. And that's a cool little thing where you can say, oh, the special merchant is here. Let's do some selling. Abandoned mineshaft. This is a mining town. I have decided this is a mining town. So off in the hills, there will be mines. And there will probably be mining stuff. Not a foundry, I don't think. Yeah, not a foundry. But like stores, processing, shipping, limited amounts. This isn't a huge hub of industry. They have a mine. It's not a huge mine. They do mining there, but they mostly ship things off. They might have a small blast furnace, but it's not like a huge foundry. A blacksmith would be in the employ of the knight, but has a side business selling picks and shovels. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly how the blacksmith would work. The blacksmith works on the manor for the knight, but is allowed to sell their services to others. A bakery. Yes. And the way that a village bakery usually works is that one person they don't do all the cooking, they own the bakery, and all the farmers and stuff who come into town can do their baking there for a fee. Are we turning this into Cornwall? It's a possibility. Cronish pastries for the miners. Yeah, actually, that makes sense. Bakery, big deal. Sells pastries to the miners. Important. But let's think, what other adventuring stuff? Like if you're an adventurer and you go into town, what do you need? Adventurers, so you need to have somebody who can sell them healing potions and do limited healing magic and answer religious questions. We got that. You need somebody who can fix their weapons and their armor. We got that. You need a general store where they can buy stuff. We've got that. You need a bookstore. So in a small medieval village, and we're talking medieval, we're not talking Beauty and the Beast. In a small medieval village, I don't think you're going to find a bookstore. A mage, but you do need an arcanist, right? Undiamond-like is right. You need someone who can identify magic items, and if they don't have anyone, you need an expert for the 4 knowledge skills, right? You need a nature person, you need a history person, you need a religion person, you need an arcana person. So we need an arcana person, but I think a printing press, probably too small. This is too small of a town to have a printing press, deadass. An alchemist, books could be sold by the roaming merchant, yes. Or we're talking an herbalist or a witch. We're talking like a witch is what we're talking here. Because I want somebody who's a nature expert and I want someone who's an arcane expert. So it's a witch. We're going to have a witch. A witch! Arcane, potions, identifying. May we burn her? Side note, weighs more than a duck. Sorry, team. Now, we also need somebody who's an expert on nature, and we could have a druid, but I'm thinking we have like an old, grizzled, like a huntsman. Rock gnomes from a witch. Nature, tracking, herbalism. So we've got like a mountain man. So now if the party needs help with questions of a natural nature, animals, potion, like natural herbs and stuff, they go to the grizzled old mountain man. If they need arcane information, they talk to the witch. The knight, yeah, that would make a lot of sense. The knight would have his own warden, his own warden. And that would be the person you talk to. A woodcutter. So you definitely have a woodcutter / kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for, carpenter. Keep in mind, during the medieval era, a lot of skills were shared by many, many people. Like blacksmithing was absolutely a specialized skill, but a lot of skills, like if you ran your own farm, you had to know how to do certain repairs and a certain amount of building. You would have a specialist in town, by all means. Bear Grylls, yeah. So Bear Grylls works for the knight. Can you think of anything else that a small adventuring town has to have? Because this looks pretty, maybe a stable, but I don't think that this is a huge like horse town. I haven't played Kingdom Come Deliverance, but we are going for that sort of medieval feel, so it would make sense. A midwife. A midwife would follow I mean, yes, you're right. Midwife would, but that'd be like an herbalist / healer. So we'll do a herbalist healer. Might be the same as the cleric, might be the same as the witch. We'll write it down, we might assign it. What important thing are we missing, Shadzar? Where do visitors stay? So here's the thing, right? The predominance of inns and taverns in D&D is highly ahistorical. The existence of just roadside inns is very ahistorical. Most taverns were frequented by members of a particular, like in medieval cities, if you lived in this neighborhood, you went to the tavern. If you didn't live in that neighborhood, it was off limits to you. And if you walked in, the record would scratch and everyone would turn and look at you. Roadside inns were very rare. Most of the time, people would just stay at a farmer's house. They just say, bam, 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 let us in. We'll give you money and gold and let us sleep in your house and then we'll move along. That is a convention that I am willing to break. It's absolutely a convention that I'm willing to go along with the cliche of having taverns everywhere. So this place does have an inn, but the inn is also someone's home, right? I figure it's like somebody happens to have a big house and they've converted it into an inn. Where do the upper class stay? So let's go one thing at a time. High-level NPCs. Would the healer be a retired adventurer or something? So most of the healer, the cleric, the knight, they'd all be mid-level NPCs. If they were higher level, they'd live somewhere else. They're mid-level, and they're bogged down with the concerns of the town or cowardice or other reasons not to go on the advent. Like if goblins kidnap the blacksmith's daughter, why doesn't the local knight take care of it? Why don't they form a militia and take care of it? They should, but they'll probably all die horribly. A craft brewery. So that's not out of the question. It's not out of the question. I'm inclined to say one of the barren towns, like the market towns nearby, is more likely to have a large brewery. But there could be a small brewery in this town. A lot of people, microbrew was very normal in medieval times. What else we got? So where would the upper class stay? Traditionally, the upper class would absolutely, miner's got to drink mother's milk. Traditionally, the upper class, like a noble, would absolutely stay at the manor house. The local nobility would be responsible for entertaining any visiting noble. Because when you think about upper class in a true feudal society, over time you had a burgeoning middle class where a rich merchant with no noble title could sort of start being regarded to have a certain amount of clout. But early on, if you weren't a landed noble, you were nobody. You were not upper class unless you were a landed noble, which meant you had your own manor, your own lands and villages somewhere. So the knight is sort of the first rank of the nobility, and a knight gets a village, gets some land, gets a nice little manor house. It's not a huge mansion. It's just like the nicest house in town. Maybe a small stronghold. More likely, it's just a fortified house. Like if you have an actual castle, and we'll look at castle demographics later, most likely it's a fortified house. And it would be the knight's responsibility to entertain any other knights, or especially like barons or earls or dukes or anyone more important who rolls up. The knight would be responsible for entertaining them. If you think about like what the hell social class do adventurers occupy? Adventurers are very disruptive to the social structure because they can obtain a huge amount of power without belonging to the nobility, which is why oftentimes barons and dukes will try to give them noble titles so they can get them to swear an oath so they can have some sort of control over these very powerful, very rich, very dangerous people. So actually a lot of nobles end up being, like a lot of nobles are or are descended from adventurers. What else we got here? A church, Rathaus, administrative building / jail. So jails were actually pretty rare. There would be like a cell of some kind in the manor house. The village we're making is not big enough to have a town hall, actually. The town hall would either be the church, a special room in the manor house, or the house of the reeve or the mayor, the person who runs things when the night is gone. And they'd have a cell, like one cell would be the jail. Most of the time, they just put someone in. They would have stocks. They would definitely have stocks to pelt people with veggies. But they wouldn't have a huge jail. The knight is responsible for dispensing justice. It's a very primitive judicial system. A bakery or butcher shop, good distinction. You would have one person in town who would know how to do butchery, but they wouldn't have a shop. It'd just be, oh, take that down to Farmer Bob's house and he'll cut that up for you real good. And I do like the idea of a bakery here for the miners. Woodcutters, yeah, but we're talking like a lumberjack who also, like a couple of people cut wood and they know how to do woodwork, and maybe one or two of them like has really good hand at carpentry, but again, they have a house, they don't have a shop. Because if you look at this place, nobody's traveling through here, right? This isn't really a trade hub. Why do you live here? Because you work in the mines or you work the fields. It's kind of between the two towns, but it's just as easy to avoid and go through this nice open grassland rather than go directly through here. The only reason you go through here is if there's a mountain pass, which I do think there will be a mountain pass connecting these two. So there's a little bit of trade and a little bit of travel, but it's mostly we have industry and agriculture here that exports to the market towns to the north and the south. So a lot of things that you would see in a large trade hub will not be around here. What else did you mention? Apiary, I don't think so here, though there are some places in the north, and a blacksmith who can specialize in weapons and armor, who works for the manor house. Manor house on the hill, and the rest around at Mott and Bailey style. Yeah, exactly. Mott and Bailey is exactly what we're looking at. A bathhouse? No. Too small. Where does this town... Oh, hey, Drew, thank you for the sub. Much appreciated. You are a constant beacon of support, and we are super grateful. Where does this town get their food? So the town is at the it's in the foothills at the edge of the forest. So there is arable land. This is a 12-mile hex. Not all this 12-mile hex is hills and forest. So it's basically this town with farmland going out on one side and mines and woodcutting coming out the other side. So most of their food is grown by farmers who work the land in the town. They might buy some food, especially like goods that they don't have, maybe certain kinds of livestock, but mostly they produce their own food. And they would go to market to sell like their ore and their goods and stuff in exchange for things that are harder to get, like butter, nice beer, spices, meats that they don't have, that sort of thing. Dare I say drug dealer? So if there's a drug dealer, they wouldn't have their own... Oh, we need criminal. We do need criminals. We need a criminal element. A criminal element. Now, most criminal elements... Like, you don't have a thieves guild, right? There's no thieves guild here. You'd have a couple of ruffians who know the bandits, and they get into trouble, they drink too much. They're small-time thieves. I think if there's a fence, it's not an organized crime. It's a couple people who know people in the bigger towns. Maybe one of the wandering merchants is on the take and can fence items for you. But the idea is that this adventure zone, it'll sustain adventure for a certain amount of time, after which, if you need, like, oh, you need a mage, an actual wizard, not just the local hedge witch, you got to go to the baronies or even all the way to Romar, depending on what you're looking for. The idea is to let this start our heroes out, but eventually drive them to engage with the larger world. That's the herbalist. Yeah, actually, the herbalist, the witch, would have some good stuff, but not like, hey, kid, can I interest you in a couple of hits? The first one's free. It's more like, oh, you need this. Here's this herb to help with pain. Here's this herb to give you weird prophetic dreams, that sort of thing. There isn't a mountain pass until someone mines it and the path opens up. That is possible. Dried meats or fish. Yeah, those would mostly be, I think someone might have a house where they smoke meats. This is one of the few, like, most of civilization, and I haven't finished mapping it all out, follows the rivers. Your big cities, you'll notice there's no river here, so it's a small town. The rivers are where the large towns and most of civilization grows up along. So they would import smoked meats and fish. You are correct. An MLM scheme, snake oil salesman. Probably a wandering one. If you sell things that don't work, you don't want to live in a town where everyone's grown up together and they've known each other for ages. Competing organized crime fund. Okay, that I like. Criminal element. Funded by criminal elements in the two baronies. Actually, I think this is more interesting. Rather than having like a gang in one barony and a gang in the other barony that are at odds, you've got the same gang operating in both towns working. So you've got the two baronies fighting each other, but the thieves are working together. Syndicate of some kind running in both baronies. So they have a rep in this town. So there is a more organized criminal element, but it's not a whole guild. It's one person who lives in this town and is an informant for this criminal conspiracy connecting the two baronies. We'll do that. You're making me want to retire to this town. Hey, you know, aside from the complete lack of dental care, tons of parasites, constant threat of being attacked by a rival knight, robber barons running on the roads, bears, and all that stuff, peasants ate pretty good. What is the indigenous wildlife? Letters to Cleo album. I am not sophisticated enough to get that reference. What is the indigenous wildlife? So this is where I'm going to check my notes, because I have done some notes on Odasvale. I was thinking each baron was paying thugs to drive out the supporters of the baron from the town. Yes. And those thugs are taking money from both sides and not telling the barons. And they're sending back reports of, oh yeah, we roughed them up, or oh, they're hitting us real bad, you better send us more money. And then they just pocket it. So there's some sort of a crime lord burgeoning here, playing both sides against each other. Okay, World Anvil, articles, all articles. I'm going to pull up the article, then I will show on stream. Rabbits, squirrels, foxes, and feral gnomes. All right, let's take a look at Odasvale, which I think is, I'm not sure if it's public yet or not. Crime lord taking advantage of the power vacuum left by the knight being away on campaign. Yes. Yes, so the mayor is either the mayor is the criminal, or the criminal has got their hands in the mayor's pockets and is puppeteering the show, or at least taking advantage of it. Okay, Odasvale is a rolling green valley with gentle slopes. I wonder if this is visible. Let me open this up in an incognito window and see if this is visible to outsiders or if it's set to private. Yeah, no, this is, I'll post this in chat. You can read a little bit about Odasvale on the World Anvil site. Urbane, thank you for the sub. Appreciate the support. Enjoy the hideous emote. What about the warden? Is he in cahoots, or does he get slain by the criminal? I'm not going to decide that just yet. I'm going to give that some time. We got to let some of these things percolate. The warden does seem like the kind of person who'd be responsible for catching poachers and bandits, so that could be an interesting form of conflict. Interesting note, the river that flows through the Orange Barony, as I just checked my notes, is called the Witchwater. The bailiff. Bailiff is a good term. That would be a great plot line. The warden has been killed and do a murder mystery in a small town. I kind of feel like that's your second adventure. Your first adventure leads you out into the wilderness, and when you come back, the warden's been killed, you know? Your first adventure is goblins kidnap the blacksmith's daughter, or the mines are haunted and it's affecting our livelihood, or, you know, something like that. You go out into the wilderness, you come back, there's a little town adventure that happens, then an adventure that takes you out into the wilderness, then an adventure that takes you into town and reveals a little bit more about the two rival barons, then another wilderness adventure. It's kind of the rhythm I would want to go with. Okay, flora and fauna. The foothills and mountains are home to brown bears. I have no idea what a chamois is, and I put it in here. Maybe the warden hires them, and when they come back, the warden's dead. That's a great plot line. That is an excellent plot line. Now you can't get paid because the person who promised to pay you is dead. Great option. I will write that down and steal it. Right. Polecats, martens, wild boars, various deer, hedgehogs, foxes, weasels, bats. Mountains have eagles and... All right, so you got bears... Not a lot of, I don't think I put a lot of wolves in here, though I probably will have wolves because they are an a level appropriate encounter for heroes of a certain level. I like the idea of there being a lot of fairies and fey creatures. Chatters and murderers. The local witch comes from the Orange Barony with witch water. It must be full of them. I think it's called witch water because it flows directly to Nenri. I think that's sort of where it got the name and the reputation. And it flows right by the Huldra, who are these powerful druids that everyone's afraid of. So there's definitely a link there of some kind. What was I doing? I just lost my train of thought. There we go. Okay. So, this is enough to get started on mapping the town and coming up with some characters. We've already got some basic ideas for talking about some critical, like the warden seems like an important person. The knight, we need to come up with who the knight is and come up with why the knight is not solving all of his town's problems, because solving your town's problems is the job of the knight. The knight is supposed to be the one who is responsible for mustering soldiers in time of war, for keeping themselves combat ready, maintaining their equipment and their horse and all that stuff, so that if they go to war, the duke can say, okay, I have a bunch of mounted knights. It's every single village has one knight. You're all going to team up with me and you're a cavalry unit now. So the knight's supposed to be the badass who takes care of things. So when we develop, but I don't want to develop the knight just yet, because I like to start out with broad strokes. And already a lot of the broad strokes that we've come up with and talked about have given rise to possible adventure hooks. So we know a little bit about the town. Now it's time to talk a little bit more about the local area. The knight dies in the campaign. Great plot arc. The knight is away at the war. Pull a Robin Hood, right? King Richard isn't here solving all the problems because he's fighting in the Crusades. The knight of the town isn't here because he's off to fight the Civil War in the north. Or he's treacherous, or he's on his deathbed, or he is mysteriously missing. There's a lot of options. Sir Roderick Hampsfield, his heraldry is a beaver with a golden nugget. What if the village is in poor standing, so the knight is given very little funds, or is just some loser, the barony dumped him there? So if the village is in poor standing, it is probably because it is not producing. And if it's not producing, I would imagine it is because it has problems. If the knight is on site, but he's a loser and isn't doing his job, that would create strife with the village, which would be an interesting plot line. I think I'm going to go with the knight is away when the campaign starts. But there's also some tension between the knight and the village, either because they're a loser or because they're always away in the wars and can't protect their village. The knight could be a drunkard. I mean, how many of you have played Mount and Blade Warband? The knight's off feasting with King Harless while his fiefs are getting taken out. The warden was the former head knight, but got booted down by the barony in favor of some loser. So, if you get stripped of your noble title, that's kind of a big deal. The Butter King, yes, hail the Butter Lords. Bannerlord when? Soon, theoretically, probably. Assuming that COVID hasn't ruined it. I'm so hyped for that. I love Warband. The mines are a scam. It's where the brigands get slaves for their slave trade to the Alfar, the Nenri. These are great plot hooks. Let's write down some plot hooks. All right, there's a couple of things. We need plot hooks, but also if we're building a sandbox, we need ambient threats. So plot hooks and ambient threats. The knight is not helping. Gone at war, incapacitated, useless / evil, mysteriously missing. Local threats. Gnomes, so many gnomes. Fairies playing pranks, absolutely. Fairies playing pranks. Haunting the mines. Huldra, the wood elves. Patrolling the borders. Abducting people who travel too far. The Alfar, up to some sort of scheme in the area. There's some sort of link to Nenri. It's not like a full-fledged plot, but the Alfar, some Alfar is up to something sinister in the area. But you have to have your plot hooks where it's like, you got your low-hanging plot hooks for low-level characters that then tie into the, like, oh, but the fairies haunting the mines, why were they doing that? Well, that's going to link us to this, and that's going to link us to this, and you get into your higher-tier plot hooks. So we want to have these big-picture, large threats in mind, but we also need to make sure we have small things that a local party can take care of. Let's see. Knight is hungover from being jilted. I like the idea of the knight being jilted, because you can have a fun adventure where you're playing matchmaker for the knight, or slapping him around to get him back in shape, right? The knight doesn't have to be... having these opportunities to roleplay with NPCs and sort of help them transform, that's interesting. That can be fun. You can have your characters develop a relationship with the knight and get them back into being the hero that the people need them to be, and then they have a fast friend. Or they kill him, you know? Options. Now you're making me not want to retire to this place. If you are making a place for adventures to happen, it is usually, by definition, a place where bad things happen to people. The church wanting to keep the population miserable, so they turn to faith. So, that does raise the question of religion. Which, I might have to check my notes, because the religious situation is complicated. And depending on what shrine we pick for the area, it's going to have a big impact on the region as a whole. I will say this. At this period in history, there is not a powerful church in this region. There are multiple competing faiths, but there isn't like a magisterium or a huge state religion. A lot of things, like there's a lot of heresy and a lot of varying, like two people worship the same deity, but they worship them in different ways. So it's not likely that you'd have a powerful like church who reports to the cathedral back in Romar here. You could have the local cleric be up to no good, trying to start trouble in the neighborhood, but it's not likely that, if it is part of a larger, more sinister plot, then it's probably tied into something smaller and more sneaky. There's a better word for it, but sneaky. Ninja Man Matt, we are talking about Odasvale. We are specifically... Ninja Man Matt, by the way, is my longtime friend and my co-creator on Anacra. He has been instrumental in developing it. So in Odasvale, here's Romar. We are putting Romar temporarily on hold while we continue to build it up, so it'll be as robust a location, adventure venue as Baldur's Gate. In the meantime, we are fleshing out a smaller town here, which is going to be our adventure hub for beginning low-level adventures. Doing stuff based on religion in general makes things complicated. It does, but I don't think it's that difficult because I've got a pretty good hand on the religions in the area. It's just a question of what choices we make. All right, what else did I miss? Oh, there's a lot going on here. I like the idea of brigands. I like the idea of brigands in the mines. So... brigands plaguing the mines, involved in slave trade. Nenri ? I like that idea. Brigands are a classic low-level threat and easy to scale into a high-level threat. Feral rock gnomes. Oh, let me switch the source back so we can see my notes. Feral rock gnomes, because that's a thing. That's canon. Fairies playing pranks. We got that. We got that. The witch water just turns red one day. That's a big plot arc. I'm gonna write it down. But it's a little bit bigger than this local area we're talking about. The miners found something. That's classic. Classic. And the first adventure, like the first few adventures in a small town, usually have to do with a threat to the town or its livelihood. So the mines, the farms, the woods. And mines are obvious dungeons, right? Easy built-in cave dungeons. That can have layers and turn into mega dungeons, so the mines are probably where our first few adventures are going to take place. Talking sheep shows up one day. Canonically, I believe that the wild sheep chase took place, if you watched that campaign, that took place somewhere to the north, probably around like here, closer to where the Arugula clan is, per Johnny the Wise's biography. One of the fun things about being a dungeon master is when your players just come up with things like the Arugula clan and you run with it. Swap back. There we go. All right, what else we got? Dokalfar, doing Dokalfar stuff. Yes, that's a great idea. Dokalfar, doing Dokalfar stuff. So the Dokalfar are this world's version of the Drow. And they're one of the biggest departures from if it exists in Anacra, if it exists in D&D, it exists in Anacra. Because the Dark Elves in my world are not chaotic, evil, backstabbing spider worshippers. Though there's nothing stopping you from playing one if you want. They are mysterious, they abduct people, they do crop circles, they paint crops purple. They cause your plants to turn purple in strange patterns and runes in your fields. They're sort of a bogeyman, and even the other elves fear them and shun them. So they're highly mysterious. Religion could just be a cult in disguise as another church. Absolutely. Evil cults. Probably infernal related. Because Uzul is always causing trouble. What else we got? A flock of sheep show up in town, refuse to leave. It turns out they're a bunch of the miners that have gone missing from what they thought were the feral rock gnomes. Tie into a miner cult to be quashed. Yep. Gnomes and Ninja Man Matt duo lore stream when? I have extended that offer. I have 100% extended that offer. And it's going to happen at some point. The thing is, though, well, not the thing, right? Because that would 100% work. But if I swap back real quick, one of the reasons that we are moving Sharon, where's Sharon? Here's Sharon. We're moving Sharon to the west, which is not in this file, is because we've almost got to a point where the nations and lands that Ninja Man Matt focuses on, that like really came from his creativity, they're almost all bundled now in the west, and the stuff that I am more involved in is now in the east. So we could just we have long conversations where we do lore building and world building and story jamming, and a lot of it, it's dope, it's great. A lot of it would be very confusing to folks, but it would be a fun opportunity to explore the rest of the world. So I'm 100% down. We will schedule that. It will happen. Catching up, only because some people were thinking small, I said Galabdur. Yep. I like the idea of Galabdur in the mountains. Traveling bard, mentally boomed teenage fighter wanders into town. Maybe some Ashardalon worshippers. So, yeah. Yeah. Ashardalon. Because remember, so here's the thing. The spell protects Odasvale from Ashardalon, and this town is on the very edge of Odasvale. So maybe he can go over here. He just can't get here. Maybe he can get close to the town. Maybe a dragon sighting would be a pretty spooky thing to happen. To fight Ashardalon is to summon the Infernals again. That would do it. A nudist colony arrives and you have to drive them off. Oh yeah, no, we will do a co-op stream, because those are some of the most, talking with Ninja Man Matt is some of the most okay, productive might be the wrong word. We go off on tangents. We absolutely pop off on huge tangents. We create vast swaths of the world, and it rarely has anything to do with what we started working on. The barrier is shrinking, and the party has to find a way to keep it strong. I do have that in mind. But, chat, let's refocus for a moment and think less about plot lines and large-scale adventures, and more about exploration and exploring. No, that's redundant. Exploration and just what is out there. Because if we're running this as a sandbox, there need to be plot lines and there need to be, you know, guided, curated experiences. But we also just need to know what's out there. Stuff that may or may not directly come into involve. If the party just heads out towards the mountains, what sort of adventures will they go on? What are the ambient things in, like, ambient stuff? Goblins in the woods, Uldra scouts, Galabdur, feral rock gnomes, a gnoll tribe that wandered too far, that wandered far from home, fairy pranksters. And again, this is the idea that you can just go out into the woods and find adventure and find trouble. And as the further you get into the woods and then the hills and the mountains, it gets more and more. There's probably a dragon in the, at least one dragon in the mountain. There's probably giants in the mountains out there somewhere, right? Roaming soul, quest marker above a cat. Roaming soul of a dead general. Yeah, ruins from the demonic Imperium and earlier, right? Because this valley has been inhabited for a long time. There's been some previous mountainside stilted ruined remains of a town. Yeah, so let's do the stilt town. That's an adventure site. Cliffside town, abandoned, spooky. That's an adventure. So adventure sites and just inhabitants and things one might encounter that aren't directly related to, you know, a new person arrives in town. Just what's already out there. If you said, screw all these plot hooks that the Dungeon Master's giving me, screw all the problems these people have, I'm going out there and I'm just going to see what's out there to see. World bosses. Yes, we do world bosses. You should be able to know that there is an incredibly scary in this low-level zone, right? In the forest, the first zone, there is a bad place that is way higher level. And we are, like, we can't go there. That's classic West Marches style design. I like those things. Let's see, mountains, world bosses. Yeah, absolutely. I will do random encounters. We are partially building random encounter tables from knowing what logically exists in the world. And again, then I'll be able to be like, oh, well, when you're exploring, you know, the foothills, you roll on this random encounter table, which has logical things that live here, logical things that live here, and one like, oh, you got to roll on the special table. The first time you roll for this, you don't see the dragon. Well, the dragon doesn't attack you, but it flies overhead, right? Those sorts of encounters with the world bosses. How close is this region to Lytaria? It's kind of, yeah, it is a little bit farther away. Craters left over from a Chardalon. A Leshen. I don't know what a Leshen is. Gnoll called Hagar, yeah. No, let me show you where we're at, Ninja Man Matt. So here's Odasvale, right? Taranot is way... Where is Taranot? Taranot's on the other side of Connacht. Taranot is... Don't worry about Taranot. Odasvale, the town that we're working on is like right here. So it's close to the Fomhor Woods of the Autumn Huldra. It's a little bit closer to Vercinget. And like it's close enough to Lytari that there's some political influence from Lytari, but not a lot. And it's very close to Nenri, where the Alfar enchanters are. And then you've got Galadron over here. And the nearest big city, you've got the Kexel dwarves up here, and the tieflings of Helmlight, and the trolls of Gluck down here. All right. Leftover shrine, yeah, hidden ruined shrine, probably Paleolithic. Hidden ruined shrine, Paleolithic, Infernal, or Huldra. That's good. Oh, well, yeah, that was useless. Thank you. Thank you. Let me redo all that pointing, but where you can actually see stuff. Odasvale. The town we're talking about is right here between these mountains. Did I click the right thing? Yes, I did. So it's semi-close to Vercinget and semi-close, very close to the Foamhor, Autumn Woods down here. Nenri, mind-controlling Alfar here. Romar here. Vercinget here. Galladron here. Lyteri here. Cool. Leshin, Leshy, that sort of Fey entity, it would definitely fit right in. Somebody did exclamation point sound. Is my sound all right? Do I sound okay? Oh, free XP, right. Seen? Yeah, years and years from now, assuming the timeline holds, this area will be Marchin. Marchin will be like here, here, and these woods. We played a campaign in the Northern Kingdoms that's, again, several thousand years from now, so who knows if things will turn out the same way. Army camps? So the thing about army camps is that none of the people involved in the war are really off in this direction. Roman caravans of refugees, they'd be coming more from this direction. So Vercinget is a newer kingdom. Let me give you a quick rundown on Vercinget. Galladron started with Magnan the Fierce, a war chief down here, who conquered his way up, defeated the old kingdom of Vercinget like 400 years ago. Conquered the kingdom of Vercinget, sailed across the waters, built his capital, kept conquering till he died. His descendants kept conquering until the borders of Galladron expanded far and wide. I haven't mapped out the full area, but it was at least all of this land right here. And Lyteri was at least subjugated. They may not have been fully invaded and taken over, but they had to pay tribute. So what happened was 400 years later, the last king of Galladron dies, and some barons and earls and some nobles of these lands who are very fond of old history books decide to use the old identity of Vercinget, because this area did sort of keep... Am I showing the dock? No, I'm not. This area, it did sort of keep its own cultural identity, even though Galladron conquered it. They still have their own distinct customs from everyone else, and their own food and that sort of thing. So they took it upon themselves when the line of King Magnan failed to take that old name of Vercinget and say, oh, we're going to reclaim our independence and we're going to reassert our old kingdom. Even though it had been so long that, and you know, record keeping wasn't as good back then as it is now. So it's a bit of a stretch. It's not like people have been saying Vercinget will rise again for 400 years. It's more like the nobles took this as they wanted to separate from Galladron. They wanted more tax money for themselves. They had their own reasons for wanting to be separate. And they used the identity of Vercinget as an emblem to rise up in rebellion. Abandoned Necromancer Lair. Very much possible. So, let me, again, this is where the town is going to be, in Odasvale. This is the Foamhor Woods of the Huldra, the Dusk Elves. Let's zoom in. If you're here in the town, if you go this way, it's farmland. And that's not to say adventure can't take place in farmland. You've got bandits, you've got, war bands and stuff like that. But mostly, the adventure is going to push this way, up into the mountains. So first, in this hex, you've got it's hills, rolling hills, and the town exists at the edge of the forest. So the first adventure zone is the forest. Then the hills get higher and higher as you go this way into this hex, and now you're in the foothills, which is sort of the next adventure zone. And then if you push even further, or you can go into different directions, now you're in the mountains. And that's about as far as we need to develop for starters, to build just something for people. Remember, we're talking about the difference between just world building for fun, for shits and giggles, versus building content to be played. And for building content to be played, we need a town, we need a couple of adventure tables, random encounter tables, a few adventure sites, and an idea of the progression. So as people get more confident, hey, we're ready to hit the foothills, the Dungeon Master can have that ready in advance. Deity of the forest manifests as an animal. That would be under the Fae heading. That's what the Fae are in this world. But yeah, Fae, forest deities, local archfey. That would make sense. Necromancer's lair, warlock's lair, probably hidden from the demonic Imperium. And I know I'm not showing the doc, but I'll just write this down. What's a giant situation like in the area? Yeah, so the Sonril Mountains, I named them, and I don't know if I made anything else up about them. I might have something in their notes. I have definitely decided that one of the higher tier foes are giants. Starting with ogres in the foothills, working up to hill giants in the upper areas. There's probably like a giant palace carved into the mountains as like an end level, not end level, but high tier dungeon farther out there. But giants and ogres are definitely one of the threats. Giants, ogres, and that's again one of those tiered threats that rises as you go farther. Was it a dragon sighting or a volcano that had been dormant? Who knows? Some crazy old... Yes. So in the last campaign, the crazy old wizard unleashed a dragon from the previous world, which is causing widespread devastation. We're going to have a non-Ashardalon dragon in the mountains. Maybe a red dragon for mountain terrain, maybe a green dragon for forest terrain, but there is a dragon that's one of like the world bosses, and it's far enough away from the town that it doesn't necessarily consider the town its territory, but close enough to be an interesting threat if we need it to be. Maybe a Ashardalon paid them a visit and sired some eggs that could potentially become very dangerous once they mature. I like the idea of a Ashardalon trying to spread his influence amongst dragonkind, uniting dragons behind him in order to take over the world. So, whatever the dragon is in the area, whatever the draconic presence... Ooh, draconic presence! So not just a dragon, but dragon minions. Kobolds, dragonborn acolytes, drakes, and such. So now there's this whole faction dedicated to a dragon there, and maybe the dragon has been visited or courted by a Ashardalon and is considering throwing their lot in with the dragon of the world before, but hasn't decided yet. Now it's an interesting plot hook. Yeah, dragonborn. A Dracolich hiding in the mountains. That would be a lot. That might be higher tier than what I'm looking for in this case. So by the mountain range, what if the water supply was contaminated? Oh, that could be a plot hook. Something in the mines starts polluting the witch water. And at first, everyone thinks that it's related to pollution, the witch water. Magical or mining related? Question mark. Yeah, Dragonborn, they're walking, talking dragon people, not like Skyrim. But it would be interesting to have like a secret cult of them. A vampire lair. I'll write it down. I'm more inclined to go with something like not a Dracolich, but a Lich, or something mid-tier from there. Sort of a Draugr feel. Because of the way that the ancient history works, if it was like pre-demonic Imperium, primitive, Viking-style burial, undead, again, Draugr from Skyrim, I might go with something like that. Succubus Den. A succubus den. So, fiends like succubi cannot enter the mortal world unless they are summoned by mortals. Ever since Romius rewrote the Emerald wrote his name upon the Emerald Tablets and changed the laws of the universe, all fiends are imprisoned in the underworld unless released by mortal magic. A leftover crypt. Yes, absolutely. A leftover crypt. Ancient crypts and burial mounds. Ancient crypts and burial mounds. Because the idea is you want this place to have an air of history. And last time on the stream, we talked about the history of Romar and all the different cultures that have dwelled there. We didn't make it all the way through sort of the timeline, building up the city, literally from the first settlement to the ruins that were built on, etc. But you've got this early era that would have been much more like early Nords, Skyrim-style burial mounds and totems and such, moving into the evil Rome demonic Imperium. And it would be good if exploring this area, this is where This is where it comes into play, that you want the lore to make your world feel alive to your players without having to explain things to them. Like what I'm doing here on this stream with you folks is terrible praxis at the table. At the table, I wouldn't explain that, oh yeah, this is a tomb that belongs to this culture, which was later supplanted by this culture, which was ultimately subjugated by the demonic imperium, which fell and then go, like, I wouldn't do that. I would describe the musty smell and the pictographs, the pictoglyphs painted on the cave walls showing a great hunt and a monster with a fiery sword plunging it into the earth, and the gifts and offerings left at this sealed sarcophagus, and how the hands of the dead, their hands and their faces were bound in these sort of strips of this weird tough leather, sealing the mouth and binding their hands into fists as part of some ancient ritual now lost, and a stag's skull has been placed as a warning or an offering before the idol, and you can feel the weight of centuries and centuries of lost time in this wordless place. You do that stuff, and you let the players get this idea that, oh, this ruin has the same sort of, you know, paintings as the last ruin we explored, but this other ruin is totally different. You let the world feel alive by having these different things, and if they want to make a history check or talk about it, then you talk about it as far as they know it, but it's more important to give them this sense that this place is old and that multiple cultures have dwelt here. It's more important that they have that feeling of the weight of time and that the place feels real, you know? A dungeon? We have a dungeon, we have dragons. Where does a small village keep their dead? That is a good question. Traditionally in a small village, it would depend on the local faith. We probably have to have at least 2 different shrines because there's so many different faiths. If there is a shrine of Romius, the overlord of the dead, then they have a graveyard. Simple, like there's a shrine and they bury the dead out back. If there's more of a temple to Vindur, the sovereign of the skies, they might take their dead up into the mountains and expose, like leave them in the open air to be picked apart by the birds and let their spirits rise to the sky, that sort of thing. So that'll depend on which religions we put in here. Necromancer, defiling religious shrine or crypt. I would like a necromancer to be like a mid-boss. There's a necromancer somewhere out in the woods doing spooky necromantic things, plaguing the village. They've got a good dungeon. Maybe they've set up in one of those crypts a burial mound of the ancient culture. They've set up their evil base there. That's a good dungeon. That's a good danger spike, too. A layer like that, you can set in a lower level area, and you have some clear signs of it being, and it's like zombies and skeletons. They're dangerous enough to be like, oh, this is a little difficulty spike, but not so dangerous that they just kill everybody. So that's a good like mid-boss, optional encounter, or a plot line leads to it. It is burial mounds. I think there would be a lot of burial mounds. Oh, what if what if the place is built on burial mounds? That's a good plot hook. Chuck the dead in a spent mine shaft, but I doubt they'd actually do that as a regular practice. Depends on their religion. Sky burials would make sense. Yeah, and if they worship Vindur, they would do sky burial. I posted a mock-up of the Gilbert emote. Dope. I will check that out. Vindur shrines. Yeah. So you can see already that if we start, we have enough notes, and let me pull up my notes real fast, just so you can see. You can see already that we've got the dungeon is a shrine to the Great Hunt, and the party gets a forgotten guardian deity. That's great. That's an excellent idea. Probably going to steal that whole thing. So you can see what we've got for our notes for starting our town. We've got some town notes, and these locations give us characters. And what we'll do as we develop each of the characters, the priest of this shrine, the priest of this shrine, the witch, the steward, or the warden rather, the mayor, the reeve, all these people, as we develop them, we will also start tying them into the larger themes of the world. Like, this person is a loyalist to this baron, and this person is a loyalist to this baron. That's about as, hardcore as we need to start out with. Just so the players start to get this idea that the NPCs have lives, they have agendas, there's a larger scale conflict going on. The world is bigger than just them. And we already have some quest hooks for these characters. You know, if the dead are being defiled, then the cleric of Ramius would probably need someone to go fight that necromancer. The steward is probably going to send them out on a mission and then maybe get murdered. The witch might know a thing or two about the dragons out in the forest and a Chardalon entreating them to join his evil alliance. So we can turn these characters both into merchants who have useful goods, sources of information, plot hooks, and characters for the PCs to develop relationships with to unveil the larger schemes of the world, all within the microcosm of this town. We've got plenty of plot hooks, and what we would want to do is we'd want to decide on a couple of these plot hooks to develop as early adventure hooks. And then we'd want this for ambient stuff, all right? So we've decided, here are some of the threats that are likely near the town. If there's goblins, we're going to put goblins on our random encounter table, and we're going to put a goblin camp somewhere in the woods. If there's feral rock gnomes, same thing. We're going to put feral gnomes on the table, but they also have a base. And the players will be able to do things like, if the players go to the goblin encampment and make peace with the goblins, then future goblin encounters are no longer hostile. Or if they wipe out the goblins, the chance of a goblin encounter changes. This gets really fun if you're running multiple parties in the same region, because now they start to do things, they start to push out into the wilderness, and the world actually shifts around them. We know for certain that the mine, we're going to need a map of the mines, we're going to need a major plot hook surrounding the mines, we're going to need some characters who live at or live near or at the mines. We know that we need some gnolls. Gnolls are a slightly tougher threat than your goblins and the like. They're going to need a camp somewhere. And so this will make it really easy for us to start building out our adventure map and our encounter tables. Once we've got a map of the nearby forest, one major plot hook, and a dungeon sort of scoped out, probably the mines. I think the mines are the most likely, first level introductory adventure. And you can see, once we get that table done, a few sites detailed, we have enough to start playing. We could whip up something pretty quick just with this brainstorming. And then we've got a lot of more advanced things, hidden burial mounds that we can scatter around, the necromancer, sort of the next tier foe, hints of dragon trouble. So we want to drop some hints early on and put some kobolds and maybe some dragonborn cultists on those encounter tables as you push in towards the hills. But already, any of these, once we start to flesh them out, hours and hours and hours of content. So I think this is a really good shape for... Is this a Four Heads t-shirt? Yes, this is a Four Heads t-shirt. The priests of Vindur could have an outpost in the mountains to watch over the dead left to the sky, and those priests go missing. That's a great idea. So we have a sky-facing shrine outside of the base. Territory dispute with the nearby barony. Yeah, absolutely. We want an early plot line have to do with deciding which side you want to favor. 100%. Will you ban spike growth, or will the necromancer use it? The necromancer will probably not use it because it's more of a druidic spell. I will not ban it, even though I hate it. It's a very, very powerful spell, but you don't ban something just because it's a good spell. I am having a blast doing all this, folks. But I think I'm going to need to turn in shortly. So let's take a look and see what else is going on in the wide world. I think this has been a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone. Your ideas have been fantastic. I'm going to do some of this work off stream, because a lot of it is sort of less interesting, less like the brainstorming and the coming up with the ideas is all really fun. But a lot of it is rolling on my NPC generation tables and maybe I'll stream that at some point because my tables are pretty good. But it's not as exciting, right? So what are some things that need filling? So first off, for subscribers have the ability to create NPCs. So for any subscribers who have already submitted their ideas for NPCs, you can have your NPC live in Romar, or you can have them live in this village, which needs a name, by the way. So that's one thing if you're in our Discord, which I think !Discord should reveal. Discord? Yep. So if you're in our Discord, you can suggest ideas for the name of this place. If you have submitted an NPC, you could have your NPC dwell here, be one of the shopkeeps, be one of the quest givers, be a hireling, etc. I think I'll know more about kind of what I need and what chat can contribute to when I've sat down and done some more of the boring stuff, like started working on the map, started listing out the key characters, stuff like that. All right, so again, thank you so much to all of our subscribers for joining us today. Thank you to all of we had a couple of folks who I had not had the pleasure of meeting before, which is super exciting. Thank you for joining us. Your ideas were super helpful. Let's see here. Is reinforced streaming still? I might hit Custa. The other thing I like to do, yeah, reinforce is down. The other thing that I like to do is I like to find out who else is streaming D&D stuff, and I like to raid them. I like to spread the love a little bit. Let's just see, Custa. We might hit Custa. Let me see who's streaming D&D, and depending on that, we will make our choice. See if there's anyone I know out there. I don't see anybody who I know personally, so we'll go ahead and we'll raid Custa. Yeah, there's a few people doing like Descent into Avernus and stuff like that. Take another look. Oh, someone's doing Danger at Dunwater. They're doing Salt Marsh. That's fun. Let's do that. We'll go ahead and raid those folks. We'll raid those folks. So, thank you everybody for dropping by. This has been a ton of fun, and I hope that everybody has an excellent evening. You can follow us on Twitter, join our Discord if you want notifications. We are looking to bring you more consistent live game content, and I want to run it in this town we're working on. So, stay tuned. Take it easy.